Hi, YouTube. Looks like we're back. Let's see if we can see how we're doing on Twitch here. Hi again, Twitch. Welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge. On a restart here on a Thursday night. We had a lot of stuttering issues on YouTube and Twitch, and it looks like I'm seeing some already. That's not good. But how's just generally speaking, how's the picture looking? Any better? Any luck? Just looking for a little picture and sound feedback. Seems better. Okay. Now it's still buffering, man. Well, I don't really know what to do about this, honestly. I'm seeing a little buffering. Everybody good? Okay. Well, we're going to live with it. So I said we had an interesting show tonight, and we do. Just a bunch of stuff to talk about. A lot of it's in the news, but most of it's personal, and so this is going to be a little difficult for me. There's really nothing more daunting than coming out and talking about things that you find either embarrassing or shameful, or you're worried that it's going to change people's opinion of you, or whatever the case may be. I know when I was talking about politics back during the virtual presidency days, I thought the only way to survive a presidential campaign would be to make a list of all the things that you've ever done wrong, ever, that you possibly could imagine, and then you put them out there during your announcement, your campaign announcement, that these are the things I've done. I'm not proud of any of them, but there they are. And the reason I'm telling you this is because I don't want anybody holding anything over my head. I'm not going to be blackmailed. If you don't think that that's, if you think that's disqualifying, I completely get it. But I always thought that was just, the way to go. And then you don't ever have to worry about any of this stuff. So this got nothing to do with anything big like that or anything particularly bad. It's just, it's a little shocking for me, so for me. So let's see if I can figure out a place to start here. And by the way, if we could just keep the comments relevant to this on this one, it's going to be a lot less distracting. So I was thinking about this on the way in, and I thought, I think you can make a pretty compelling case that that Abraham Lincoln was the greatest man of the 19th century, and that Winston Churchill was the greatest man of the 20th century. And anybody have a quick guess at what those two guys had in common, aside from saving Western civilization as we know it? It's a very, very odd connection that I've never really put together before. Now, it's not guts. They both had guts. Lots of people had guts, but these two guys, as we've looked into their history more and more, we find that it's really true. Unusual first names. No, actually, the one thing that Winston Churchill and Abraham Lincoln have in common is that they both suffered enormously from clinical depression. Enormously. Lincoln used to roam the halls of the White House when his guards when he finally got to sleep, they could hear him moaning in his room, just moaning from all of the weight of what he had to do. Churchill referred to it as the black dog, which I always thought was a particularly useful description, because that's pretty much exactly what it feels like. I've suffered from it since I was, I don't know, I think the onset probably happened when I was an early teenager. My parents got divorced when I was 12, and I certainly know that when I was in Bermuda as a kid, I look at the photographs of myself then, and I've got this tan, and I was blonde. I was out in the beach all the time. I was scuba diving. I was real popular at school. I had lots of friends. I looked really, really fit and healthy. And then when we moved to Key Biscayne, I remember my first years there, I was probably 13, 14, that kind of thing. And then as I look at those pictures, and I was just happy and healthy looking. And then somewhere around the age 14, 15, 16, probably when I met Phil at the planetarium, probably what set me off. No, but somewhere around there, things really changed. And that's when my parents got divorced, and we went from having, we were never upper class, and I don't even know if we were completely upper middle class. We were pretty solidly middle class. But my parents got divorced, and my mom didn't ask for any alimony or anything. And next thing you know, we're just kind of hanging on. And I don't know if that triggered things, but it wasn't really the cause of them. So I'm going to go through a bit of a history of myself that most of you have never really heard before, and I'm not in a big hurry to talk about these things, but there's a point to all of this, and hopefully you'll stick around long enough to see that. Let me just start by saying that the main point of why I'm doing this in public instead of in private, with which I've done with several friends and close friends, is because, as we pointed out in that colonoscopy episode, I remember, he said it several times, but I remember the first time I met Bert Rutan, which would have been 2012, I think, or 13. He said, this is the first time he shook my hand. He said, "You saved my life." I said, "What?" I had talked about having a heart irregularity and having the radioactive tracer dye done and all of that stuff. And he said he saw that, and it made him get in and do it. And the cardiac surgeon said that he had the muscles around his heart had become so ossified that they thought he had another week to go and he would have just dropped dead of a heart attack. So he constantly tells me I saved his life, and when I think about all the things he's done and how highly I regard him, it's one of the signal honors of my life and my career. I've had a number of other people, a lot of veterans say, that just talking about these kind of things really helps them a lot. There's a change on the horizon. I'm not just going over old material, but I got to set some backstory here. So by the time I was in a senior in high school, and certainly by the time I got to college, something was really clearly wrong. And I weighed 119 pounds. A lot of that was just not having any money to eat. I remember pooling our money to get a burger for the day. But I would get these tremendous mood swings, and I'd be sitting there with everybody else in the back of the Windjammer and having a good time, and somebody would say something. It wasn't even about me. It was just something. And I would just crash. Kimberly Weaver says, I figured this out when you brought up gambling years ago. I may have brought up gambling, but I never had a gambling problem. And this is what makes me a little unique and maybe a little hard to understand. But I was clearly showing, some pretty severe kind of, bipolar activity then. And I honestly cannot tell you. I remember the first half of my 20s because it was in, I went to Narcotics Anonymous meetings starting in 1985. And when I went to those meetings, it was because I finally went to a therapist in 1985 after, at least 10 years of being off kilter. And she said, okay, I can see you twice a week, but you need to go to these meetings. And I wouldn't have gone if my friend Suzanne Donzella hadn't forced me to, but she did. And so I was the only person in Narcotics Anonymous, and I mean this sincerely, I really mean it. In all of the meetings that I went to, and in all of the other wider meetings that I went to over the course of 18 months, I never ever met anybody else who had the same symptoms that I did. I was the only non-alcoholic, non-drug using member of Narcotics Anonymous, at least in my experience. Everybody else in there had a drug problem or a drinking problem, and I've never had a drug problem or a drinking problem. I don't know if that's because my dad drilled it into me or whatever the case may be, but I just never did. But this first therapist had the sense to send me to this because she figured out I had this addictive personality disorder, which is kind of a result of a fundamental sense of depression and anxiety. And like I said, these weren't there at the beginning of my life, but they certainly came on pretty hard. I had to, once my parents got divorced, my mom went on a period of self-discovery, and this sounds like a flaky thing to do. It wasn't. She just put up with an awful lot for a long time. She had had a horrific childhood, horrific, raised by genuine psychopaths during World War II, and they shipped all the kids out of London. They shipped my mom and my Uncle Ted to this woman who picked them up at the train and took them home, and then would, just beat them incessantly, chase them around the room with a knife. My mom had a pet goose. It was about all she had during those years, and this woman cooked that goose and fed her to dinner and then told her about it. That's the kind of person that was. So everybody's got problems, and everybody inherits problems. So not everybody, but I certainly did. And my dad was a I've said many times, my dad was Don Draper. He was exactly that guy. He would just walk around everywhere with a cigarette in one hand, a scotch in another, and that was life. And so my dad was an alcoholic. He had a serious drinking problem. He eventually, many years after I'd grown up, got that really under control. He stopped smoking cold turkey after being a 2 or 3 pack a day guy. So that was great, and I was happy that he did it. I was very proud of him, but it was way past the point when I was out of the house. And if you haven't had that experience of a parent with a drinking problem, a real drinking problem, you don't realize how catastrophic that can be. I mean, just catastrophic. It just destroys structural supports. It's almost like you can feel. It's almost like you just feel like somebody dumped acid or jet fuel on the steel structure of your personality. I'm not going to go into a lot of details about all this. Just to give you one example, I remember one night when my dad came home. These were the old days. We had just moved to Key Biscayne in 1972 or 73, I think. And I remember we were home one night. My dad was never home. He was at the hotel, or he was out at his watering hole, and we saw like these police lights outside. And these were the days when if policemen knew you, they would basically escort you home. So that's what they did. He got out of the car, thanked the policeman. The policeman drove away. He walked in. Florida houses in those days were one-story level houses with lots and lots of interior sliding doors because you could open up parts to the mosquitoes and the humidity. And so he came in and he just walked right into this glass door and fell down on the ground, and he didn't get up. That wasn't fun. And I also saw some physical abuse that I can remember one case of, and again, I'm not really happy talking about this because I have brothers and sisters and other relatives. Suffice it to say, I don't know how many occasions, I can remember one of them. I remember being woken up in the middle of the night and having my dad knock my mom down to the ground. And I think all of those things together will do a lot of damage to somebody. And especially my mom, who had been so badly traumatized by that. She was kidnapped from her mother by her father, took her away on a motorcycle. It's like a scene from a movie. They're riding along. My granddad is driving a motorcycle. My mother and my Uncle Ted are on the back. They're hauling ass down this road in Malta. Mom and Ted's mom is running after them, screaming and crying. So, you kind of get a chance to see where all of this stuff comes from. I actually think, no, I don't know if that's the worst of it, but that's some of the worst of it. So I've spent a long time looking back on this and trying to understand what's caused all of this. And I think my mother was just really emotionally very distant and protective because she'd been so badly traumatized. I want to state this as clearly as I can. I was never physically beaten at any time, nor do I have any memories of being like verbally abused. I always remember my mom and dad both telling me I could be anything I want to. I remember them telling me how proud they were of me. I remember all of that. I've never forgotten it, and I've never heard anything other than that in my memory. Never. Never belittled, never, I was spanked a couple times, but no, none of that. But I think that that sort of emotional neglect coupled with this sort of, unpredictability of a father with a drinking problem is a large part of what I almost said what causes something to happen. I think from my studies and understanding, it's much better to say that these kind of things don't cause something to happen, they prevent something from happening. And what they prevent, I think, is a sense of inner peace and inner worth and inner stability. It's not even confidence. You're not old enough to have confidence. But this is, by the time you're 4 years old, this is pretty much locked in one way or another. And so I'm pretty clear that at some point, well, between ages of 0 and 4, I never got that parental support that I needed from either side. And it left me with this lifelong sense of, and you can't even identify it. See, here's the thing that I'm trying to explain to people. There are people out there watching this now who understand exactly what I'm saying. But for those of you who don't, the thing I'm trying to make clear to you is you have no way of knowing what's not there that should be there, especially when you're young, because you've got nothing to compare it to. Just nothing. You've got nothing to compare it to. And so when my mom, got divorced and she went off and started to find some peace for herself, which I deeply admire her for. I was probably 14 at the time. My sister told me several years ago that I had basically taken care of and fed the whole family for about 2 or 3 years. I have no memory of this at all. I have none. From the ages of 14 to 16, I was, making the dinners, and, I was had a 13-year-old brother and then another brother who was 10 and a sister who was 9. I have no memory of it at all, none of it. Somewhere, obviously puberty had a lot to do with it. I'd gone to British schools, which had given me this incredible education, which I get a chance to show off as often as I can, and all of the things that you guys have liked about the work I do comes from this really extraordinary education and this I was the oldest and just a real thirst for knowledge, and this was at the most critical point of my life. Two things really saved me from major off the bridge kind of thing. One of them were my friends Steve and Fritz, who are really great friends, and I don't mean to embarrass them, but the single greatest thing that happened to me during the time was meeting Phil Trick and his wife Bobby. These two people, first of all, Phil was the advanced old age of 23, I think, when I met him when I was 13, and Phil and Bobby, especially Phil, was the only person that really paid enough attention to me to give me a moral code, like a moral sense of, I know what right and wrong was. I just never had it demonstrated before, and that time at the planetarium, which was several years, I don't know what it would have done without it. It gave me a tremendous education and all that, but at the same time, it kept me out of Dade County Public Schools, which would have been just absolutely ruinous. So finally I get to college, and by the time I'm in college, I'm a real mess. I'm really thin. I didn't have any experience really with girls. I was, most of the kids that I grew up with in high school had been, had known everybody else since kindergarten. They'd all grown up together. Not only had I not grown up with any of them, I'd gone to all boys schools. I didn't have the faintest idea what was going on. And the older I got, the further away that train ran. And so it was a pretty desperate time. I look back on it and I think, man, opportunities that I had, I was just too stupid to see. after I got out of college, I went back to South Florida, did some planetarium work again, worked at laser shows and stuff, and got a job in nightclubs, which was cool. Then I had a chance to make a feature film for $800,000 if we could get the thing off the ground in 10 days. I wrote the worst script I've ever written in my life. And of that $800,000, $450,000 got pulled on the second day of shooting. So there's all that. Thank you, Road Rider. That didn't help any. And when that thing became Flaming Wreckage, because that was the dream of my life, and it never got finished. It was just it made the Hindenburg look like like one of those little balloons that they launch, on for your birthday in Thailand or whatever. But that was the thing that finally got me into this therapy. So I don't remember anything from about 28 to about 40. And the other 300K went up the producer's nose. Yes, I told this story before. We sent him out with like $100 to get lunch for everybody, and he came back an hour and a half, 2.5 hours later, with a loaf of white bread and a big tub of deviled ham from Publix. Yeah, so that was a lot to deal with, and so a combination, I guess, of having to be responsible for my family and then you being in charge of this project and all this other stuff. I just ended up being responsible for things that were number one, mostly beyond my control, and number two, I wasn't particularly capable of dealing with that, although I didn't know it at the time. I honestly cannot tell you anything about my 30s. I was a limousine driver. I remember I was working at the glider port. I learned to fly. I went back to the University of Florida, did my sketch comedy show, but really nothing made much sense to me then. I came back out to LA in '98, hit the reefs again. My uncle Ted, who had my mom's younger brother, took me to Australia for 3 months just to kind of reboot. And when I came back, I had $40, and that's all. My mom was watching my cats. And this is one of the moments I'm most proud of, actually. When I got back from Australia with $40, my friend Fritz's wife got me an interview for an editor's position down in Orange County, and that was Bill Burrid. You may remember his dad. It wasn't Wild Kingdom. He had a nature show, and John. It was Bill Burrid. Yeah, so John Burrid was his son. And I went down there and interviewed, and John not only hired me at $650 a week, he advanced me either 1 week or 2 weeks pay just on the basis of the interview. So I moved down to the Princess Motel in, I don't know, some really crummy neighborhood. It was $40, $50 a night place. I had bought a bike with my $40, and I rode to work on a bike, and I was doing some extra work on the side. And from then I just started, slowly, rebuilding everything. The extra work, they let me come in. John Burrid, also a huge savior of mine. He let me come in early, and I would edit stuff for a sports company. Then I'd do my 9-to-5 job. Then I'd go get up, I'd eat. I'd come back and stay till about midnight. And then I'd go back to the Princess Motel, be sure to bring my bike up into the room and lock the doors. So I eventually got an apartment. I eventually got a old used car, and then slowly built myself up to being a production coordinator at a studio in Hollywood, and then an editor in Hollywood, and then right around 2003, my current path began. December 2002, when I started writing Eject, 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 and I started getting all of these comments from many of you people who are here tonight, and I suddenly found my voice and my calling. And then I went through a period in my mid to late 40s and into my 50s up until I got married, where I was really like, I was just Joe Cool. All of a sudden, I'm a little bit famous, and I'm going to these incredible events with all these movie stars, and when I'm in a room with Gary Sinise and John Voight and Clint Eastwood and Tom Selleck and and me. And blessed art thou, Rachel Lucas, another saint who helped me. Rachel Lucas built my website. So they would bring me into these meetings because I had just been thinking about these things. I've been thinking about them my whole life. And I really found my niche and my momentum and had a lot to say. And that was a time when you could stand up in front of a green screen and say these things. So I got a little bit famous, and started doing really well. And I went through, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 years where I went from being, like the biggest dork on the planet to being pretty smooth, really began to really understand the whole dating thing and got really good at that. Then I met my wife and got married, and that was the best thing that ever happened to me. So anyway, that's the story of the film so far. So back to the news, now that we have the basic backstory here. The internet has changed, and YouTube has changed, and it became clear to me that some of it was adjustment of the algorithm, and a lot of it was just changing styles. But the firewalls and the afterburners that used to get, the floor would be 400,000 views. In the space of a year, they dropped to about 20,000, and I've done about 300 of them. And hey, Caitlin, and I just found that I just didn't have a lot more that I could say in that particular situation. And so I spent a lot of time wondering, what the hell am I going to do? And then all of a sudden, I tried to pull it off with the CGI and the Major Mace Mattingly stuff, and I thought it's okay, it's getting there. And then along comes the AI video, and suddenly I've got the tools that I've wanted since I was 16 in my hand. Where does that leave us? When I told you about, it was last June, and somebody got up at a conservative foundation, small one, and I've spoken in public no less than 200 times. And I was just emceeing this event, and it was, it was a really small event. And then somebody got up and on the spot donated $250,000, and I had this electric jolt through my brain, and I realized, my God, man, I'm sitting here with this idea that I've been working on in one form or another for half a century, and now I have the means to do it. So I was on fire and still on fire, and then about a month ago, look, I have to tell you, a lot of this current stagnation has got to do with Natasha's experience in Dubai, not just because of the fact that she was over there, with drones exploding overhead, but because of the sort of just endless guilt I feel about not having been able to do anything about this situation for 10 years. When you have a family and you're responsible for other people, it's a burden, and it's like, no matter how hard I tried, I could not get her daughter into the country with a tourist visa. And I pulled every string I had, and I assured my wife that this would do it because I didn't see any problems with it. But for whatever reason, it still hasn't happened, and she is constantly sad about not being able to spend time with her daughter, and I have to comfort her for that, which is my job, and which I certainly don't mind doing. But every time she talks about how sad she is about her daughter not being here, whether I deserve it or not, I just constantly feel like that's just a personal failure on my part. I haven't done enough. So Natasha's been really shaken up since she got back from Dubai and so on, and that I'm sure had a lot to do with it. So here's where we kind of make the pivot to the recent news. Let me think here for 1 second. began to feel a resistance to coming in and getting work done on things, and usually that resistance is a sign of well, let me start it differently here, because what I'm about to tell you has shocked me as much as it's going to shock you. I was telling Natasha that I was just running into more and more resistance, and that it was so difficult for me to understand, because this colonies thing is the thing I've always wanted to do, and I've just been so excited about it, but there's just so much to learn and there's so much to do, and I was just getting overwhelmed by it, and so by happy coincidence, she had just been looking at something the last couple days. She has a whole ring of like Russian YouTube people, and she was asking me if I'd ever heard of Iboga. I said I have no idea. And so she started showing me some videos, and the first one she showed me was of Joe Rogan talking about Ibogaine treatment and the effect that it's had on people with lifelong severe depression, and especially on veterans with PTSD. And I'm talking about the kind of guys who are sitting there, and some of them may be sitting there right now, looking at a gun on the table. I never got to that point, but clearly there's been something wrong. I look at guys like, and I can't be clear enough on this, I have enormous respect for all of them, But I look at Benny Johnson and Asmongold, and even guys like Mike Knowles and the whole crowd over at Daily Wire, and all the people that are in this business, and they're all millionaires, and I'm not, and I just started asking myself why, what is it, what's going on, what is blocking me? So Natasha told me about this Ibogaine treatment, and I've been on antidepressants since 1993, and anti-anxiety medication since about 2017, I guess. For only at nighttime, it just helps me sleep a lot. If I don't take that at night, I have these horrible dreams. I have nightmares all the time. I never remember my dreams. I'll get to that in a second, because that's about the next step. So anyway, she was telling me about this, and I watched about 6 or 7 or 8 videos on the effect that this has. And this is not like a medication. This is I hate to say this because I don't want people to think that I'm putting entirely too much openness, but the clinical results seem to be that it is pretty much as close to a cure as you can get from this. Lifelong alcoholics have had this Ibogaine treatment, and 85% of them, after one treatment, they just never drink again. The veterans who are ready to just put a gun in their mouth, they come back and they're fine. I heard a story from somebody who knew somebody who had gone down for one of these treatments, because they're not legal here in the United States, and said that his friend had been a special forces guy, and he went down for that treatment. And when he came back, there were some real problems with his marriage, because his wife didn't know what to do with him, since he didn't have the hair trigger anger anymore, and he didn't flare up anymore, and he didn't lose, start screaming anymore. He just was really calm about things. And I've heard anecdotally from a number of people who have been through this, that this is a life changer. So I found out, did some research for Iboga. Iboga is the name of the root. I think it comes from West Africa, and it is it's a psychotropic chemical, psychoactive chemical, and it does some strange things to you. Unlike most psychedelics people do for recreational purposes, people want to see music or they want to hear colors or so on, so they'll do psychedelics and that sort of thing. But my understanding about Iboga is that it is not that at all. There's no, this is not like a happy drug and you don't get to see all sorts of cool things. This is entirely different. What this treatment apparently does, and I don't understand it clearly enough, but if I had to guess, I would say that I have had this experience before. I have done mushrooms on 3 occasions under close supervision, and I remembered things that I hadn't remembered before, but these were like very small doses, very small. But I tolerated it well. Natasha had done it for some of her past traumas, and she got real scared. But I just went in there, and the second I started feeling effects, I just had the best time. I just started laughing and laughing and laughing. I thought it was great. I was floating over Atlantis. I was lying on my back with a crown on my head. I could look down and see the kingdom of Atlantis below me. It was fantastic. So when I heard about this Iboga treatment, I realized I have to get this because increasing the doses on the antidepressants and the Adderall to help stay focused, and just, these drugs are I've been taking them for half my life, and they don't really help the problem. They just mitigate the symptoms. They don't go to the core of the problem. And so when I heard about this, there's 2 clinics in Mexico. One of them seemed pretty sketchy. The other one didn't. Now, Natasha and I have been to Cancun a couple times. She's gone down to Cancun 3 times to see her daughter there. Mexico's one of the few places where a U.S. citizen and a Russian citizen can travel without a visa that you need to go to the embassy for. So we've been to Cancun 3 times, and I really liked it. And people in Mexico, in Cancun, said Cancun isn't Mexico. Had a wonderful time, never felt the slightest bit of insecurity or worry there or anything. But there's a clinic there called Beyond, B-E-O-N-D, and this was the one that people were talking about. And so Natasha showed me this stuff, and I thought, it's expensive. It's expensive. It's depending on how hard you push for your appointment. The base price is $15,000, and you're pushing for like an emergency visit, it goes up to $20,000, which I don't have, just lying around. But the second I saw this and started to really research it, oh, by the way, just for those of you worried about this kind of thing, they've treated 3,000 people at this clinic, and they've never had a medical emergency. The reason I liked it, the reason I got excited about it was they do 2 or 3 days of nutrition and exercise, meditation, all this other stuff. But during the actual period of the medication, they don't just give you a dose and then it wears off. You spend between 36 and 48 hours on this stuff. You're lying in this nice room with this soft lighting, but, and this is a big but, you are hooked up to EKG machines. They have medical doctors who are there. They're constantly monitoring your blood pressure. They're monitoring, your respiration, and if they see you getting into trouble, they've got a basic. It's just a basic antidote. It just basically they can just turn it off. And the idea of being medically supervised was really great. What this apparently does is, right now as we're having a conversation, I know who I am. I'm Bill Whittle, and you're all who you are. Fine people. And that's our personality, and our personality is something that we don't really understand very well. We know it's how we refer to ourselves and how we interact with the world, but it is a construct of your subconscious mind, your conscious mind, if you want to go with Freud, the superego, and it's a collection of all of your memories, all of your influences, the things you've learned, the things you see, the things you believe. All of this goes together into your personality. And it's been known to me forever, because I got a good education, that there's a large part of our brain, the subconscious mind, that has a huge effect on us, but we don't realize the effect it has on us because it's invisible. It acts it connects to the conscious mind in a way that the conscious mind is not aware of, at least not during normal circumstances. So my understanding of what the ibogaine treatment is that this natural chemical, it's not synthesized in a lab like LSD. This natural chemical essentially dissolves your ego. It dissolves your sense of self. And that means that instead of not facing all of these horrible things that have happened to you, you can face them because it is genuinely like watching a movie of somebody else's life. And it's the repression of these traumas that cause so much anxiety and so much depression. You don't get things done and you don't know why, you don't know what's stopping you, and so you get depressed, and the more depressed you get, the more anxious you get, and then round and round and round you go. So I resolved, I don't know what night this was, let's just say for the sake of the argument, it was a Wednesday night. I said, okay, Thursday I'm gonna call this clinic. I didn't call them, and that when I got home I realized, why didn't I call them today? This was something that I thought of and that I wanted really badly. So why didn't I do it? Well, I don't know. And then I didn't call him Friday. And then I think it was Friday night or Saturday night, when Natasha said, Bill's unbelievably great news. What? I come home from the studio and she says, here, look at this. And she showed me a clip. And it was Joe Rogan, J.D. Vance, Bobby Kennedy Jr., and Donald Trump sitting in the Oval Office talking about how Trump is going to give the go-ahead to ibogaine treatments, and basically asking, hey, would you like me to fast-track this? And Joe Rogan thanks the president, and Joe Rogan says there's at least 5 million addicts in the country a year or whatever who die from this, who could really use this treatment. And Natasha was so happy about it, and I looked at it and I said, Joe Rogan has just announced the cure for cancer, and there's one place in the world where you can get this cure for cancer, and they can handle 7 people a week. And I realized that this place, starting that instant, is, because he mentioned it by name, is going to be booked for 5 years in advance. And I thought, even if they were to fast track this, there's no way this is going to become available in the next 2 or 3 years. And now we get to the part that really shocked the hell out of me, and I'm sure will shock the hell out of you too. When I realized that they'd made this announcement and that I hadn't already called and reserved my place on the list, that hope that I had for 3 or 4 days that I could put an end to this, not just an end to the dependency on the medication, that I would stop these unknown behaviors that just keep tripping me up. I'd be able to identify all of it, and 85% success rate in one treatment, 97% with 2, and those are for like guys under the bridge drug addicts. I thought this was it, man. This is the solution. And then that night, I realized that this salvation, medical salvation anyway, was probably gone. Now, was that a reasonable assumption? Natasha said it wasn't, but I was convinced it was. I was convinced that this one clinic, mentioned by name, would immediately get booked by all of these multimillionaire drug addicts and movie stars and all the rest of it, and that this thing had been dangled right in front of me and taken away. And now we get to the really shocking thing that that I am obviously reluctant to talk about because I don't know, because it surprised me. But the reason I say that, the reason I'm telling you this is because there is an important win in here. So when I realized that this treatment that I wanted was gone forever, that was my understanding at the time. When I realized it was gone forever off the table, and all of this hope of getting rid of all of these things that were keeping me away from, look, here's the weird thing about it, right? If you ask me honestly, if we sat face to face and said, Bill, how would you rate yourself at what you do? I honestly would say, and I mean this without any arrogance, I would seriously tell you, because I genuinely believe it, I would tell you, when I am on my game, I am the best in the business. Nobody can touch me when I'm on my game. When I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, there's nobody out there that does this better than me. And I really believe that. And I still believe it. But after I got that news, I went into my bedroom and I just lay down on the bed. I didn't cry or anything. I just started feeling this psychological pain that was so intense that I ended up lying on my side just jackknifed in half, and I started straining all of my muscles as hard as I could. I had been that stressed before probably 3 times in my life over financial issues. One time I just walked around in circles and I just kept repeating things, just walking around these little circles because I just didn't have the rent money. And I started this repetitive kind of rocking, and then I would just have this repetitive sentence, and I just started doing this, and then I just started kicking the bed, kicking, lying on the bed, kicking as hard as I could. There have been a few times in my life when the stress has been so great that so overwhelming. It's just the sense of responsibility and just guilt and all of this. Sometimes when it hurts so much, and I'm not the only person who does this, but it hurts so much that the only thing I could do was punch myself in the face about as hard as I could, a couple, 3 times. And you see this and you think, my God, this man has lost his frickin' mind. He's just batshit crazy. But talking to psychiatrists about this and counselors about it, the truth of it is that people who get that level of overwhelming psychological pain do it because the physical pain overrides the psychological pain for a period of time. And I don't recommend it, but it seems to work a little bit. And of course it freaks Natasha out, and rightfully so. So here's where it gets really interesting. So I was lying on this bed, and the more I thought about it, the more angry I got. And I wanted to write Joe Rogan and tell him that he had just destroyed this opportunity for millions of people in order to get some just a little more clout, as if he doesn't have enough already. Look at me, I'm in the White House. Hey, guess what? I've convinced the president to approve this treatment. And now nobody can get it. And I just went deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into this hole because I put so much hope into this thing. And I keep saying, here's where it gets interesting. Hopefully it's been getting more interesting, but here's where it got really interesting. John Pershing says it's similar to cutting. Yes, people, little young women are real susceptible to cutting themselves, and you wonder why they do it. They do it because the physical pain overrides the psychological pain. So then something happened to me that I'd never had happen to me before. I started talking to myself, and the voice that was talking, it's obviously my voice. I must have heard this voice every night in my life, but I'd never heard it aloud before. And that is a fundamental difference. I don't remember any of my dreams ever, except for when I get woken up in the middle of them, and that I am just always sweating. The one moment I remember from many, many years ago was I was in that half awake, half asleep dream state, and I was on the beach, and I could see myself. It was nighttime, and I could see myself like half deep in the surf, and the ocean was black, and these waves were black, and I was standing on the shore. This was my conscious self, and I was looking at myself in the water, and that guy was walking back into the dark, and the only thing he said to me was, "It's hell down here." And I thought, my God, I just have nightly dreams of mortal combat with my fists, fighting off other people. Sometimes I'm fighting my dad, sometimes I'm fighting other people, sometimes there's a group of people. I have a lot of like these anxiety actors' dreams where I've got something that's due tomorrow morning, and I've got to be there in 15 minutes, and it's not ready, and just responsibility dreams, just failed responsibility dreams. And then this voice started saying, hang on a second. Let me rephrase that. Then when I was just balled up and all of my muscles were just in state of constant contraction, and I was writhing in this psychological agony, I heard this voice say, no, you're not getting any help. You're not getting any help because you don't deserve any help. You're not getting nothing. You're getting nothing because you deserve nothing. And you've never deserved anything. And you're a fraud, and you're a liar, and you're I remember the line, you're God's joke. All of the ability and all of the talent that you've had, and your inability to capitalize that is something that we laugh at. We just think it's hilarious. But no, you're not going to get any help. This is your whole life, and there it is. And the thing that struck me the most about hearing that voice was how much pleasure it just how much it was enjoying itself, really enjoying itself. You're not getting anything. You are God's joke, and what on earth made you think that anything would be different for you? Of course you're not going to this clinic. Why do you think we let you believe? Why do you think we gave you hope for like 3 or 4 days? Why? Because it's just so much fun to watch you realize that you don't deserve any of this stuff. If we didn't give you little bits of hope every now and then, it'd get boring. And I heard these words coming out of my mouth, and I cannot tell you how much pleasure there was in the cruelty of it. Now, I have no doubt that those voices talk to me every single night. I have no doubt about it. But hearing them out loud, Tranquility Basis, how do you know it was enjoying it? I could hear the pleasure in its voice. I could hear it. It was just, you're not going anywhere, man. It was just having a fine time, a really fine time. I'm sorry, let me just deal with this. Can someone explain what I missed about Trump-Rogan bill prevents Bill from getting the treatment? I had failed to make the call for 3 days, Curlitan, and after I had procrastinated on making the call, Joe Rogan in the White House with the President of the United States announces this treatment at this one clinic, and I thought, there's not ever going to be an opening. They can process 7-10 people a week. It's like I said. We've just announced the cure for cancer, and it's only $20,000, and we can cure people of cancer. We can cure 7 to 10 of them a week. What do you think is going to happen to that place? And by the way, if it was 15 grand or 20 grand, if you wanted it rushed, once it's getting flooded with calls, what do you think is going to happen to the price? This was just this loop in my head. Just doom loop, just a doom loop. So that night, the physical manifestations of it, just this rocking and this voice, And the little tiny part of me, this would be the same part of me that got a bike, when I got back from Australia with $40 and got up at 5 in the morning and just rode into work and did 2 shifts and just slowly built it back up. That part of me that just refused to buckle, that part of me that's always refused to do drugs or alcohol because I knew that those were avoidance mechanisms. I've never done them. I've just fought this as hard as I could. But that fundamental voice in there was saying, "You're not worth it. You're not worth it. You're not ever going to be worth it." And I realized that voice is the voice that keeps me from just going out and just making tons and tons of money, among other things. But here's the point that's so important. Once I actually heard it, I never forgot it. And the next day, I woke up, and I was pretty emotionally drained, obviously, but I woke up and I sat there in bed, and I said to myself, if that fucking voice thinks it's going to ruin my life for the rest of my life, it's got another thing coming. And I just got up, and I got to work, and I got more done that next day, than I'd done in weeks. Because I could understand it. I saw it. And this, I think, is the essence of what this Ibogaine does on a much larger, deeper scale. It shows you and tells you these things that you tell yourself and these scripts that you run. And once you see them, you can understand how unrealistic they are and how outdated they are. Battle Smurf said something, I meant to tell this story earlier. When I was talking about when I was an editor before I started writing Eject, I was coming back from an edit session at back when we used to have post-production houses, and it was about 2:30 in the morning. I was living in Hollywood. I was getting off the highway, the Highland exit on the Hollywood freeway coming south, and I was thinking about things, and I had this realization, and the realization was, you know what, Bill, you're a guy with a great future behind you. You came out here to try and make movies, and you gave it your best shot. You did the best you could, but you just didn't have, you had the talent. I don't think there's any question about that. Never really doubted that. Just didn't have what it takes, and you missed the bus. And you're going to be an editor for the rest of your life, and you're going to be working for 27-year-olds. You're going to keep getting older, but they're always going to be 27. And this isn't Stalingrad, man. It's not a bad life, but you just missed the bus. And then 2 years later, I start writing Eject, and then that leads to Friends of Abe and PJTV and all the rest of this stuff. So on Monday, after this announcement, which would have been 3-4 weeks ago now, I guess, I came into the studio early, and I checked the calendar for this. It gets saved on YouTube, Dave. Thanks. And I got in touch with this clinic, and I looked for the earliest phone date, because you got to do a phone consultation first before you go in, so this would have been. It said regular scheduling, and I went to check for the first available phone call, and it was like April, nothing. May, nothing. June, nothing. July is as far as they went, nothing. I thought, oh, great. So then I just decided to try a priority call, which costs an entire $49. And then I looked again, and it was April, nothing. May 8th. Today's May 7th. I said, oh boy. So I booked that right away. And once I booked that, I emailed the clinic, and I said, I've got an intake call on the 8th at 10:30 in the morning. And and if everything goes well, what does your availability look like? Now remember, they have like standard availability and rush availability, but they said May's pretty booked. We got a couple openings in May. It's considerably better in June, and then in July it's pretty much wide open. And I thought, oh, for the love of God, thank God, you know. So so I'm going to go in. It's not a phone call I am likely to miss. I'm going to set 13 alarms, and tomorrow morning at 10:30 Pacific, I'm going to talk to one of these guys and see whether or not I'm a contender for this. No question I'm a contender for this. None. It may require these drugs like ayahuasca or I don't know about the ibogaine, but I know ayahuasca is not a good combination with oh, thank you, John. Bless your heart. Bless your heart. John, again, with a super chat for $99 and never fails to just move me incredibly. But I'm going to talk to them tomorrow, and I may have to get off the SSRIs, which will be, instead of just cold turkeying it, I'll just walk it down. Probably couldn't get in until June or July anyway. But if I just, as long as I have an appointment, I'll have some hope. And, you know, as far as the cost of it goes, I realized that this has to be the most, this has to be the best investment I could make in my life, and I wish I could have made it 25, 30 years ago. So I will find some way to get there. If I have to sell the bitch and Camaro to do it, I'll do it. My hope is that, and I want to make this clear to them, that this is not me doing this for clout. I'm hoping I can certainly chronicle it. No one can stop me from doing that. But let me just tell you what I'm hoping for here. And I'm not hoping for anything more than what other people have, 3,000 people have expressed. I talked to somebody about this, and I said, if I were to give you an honest estimate, I would say that I am probably functioning at about 20% of my total capacity as a result of this voice in my head that I hear every single night, and that just gets blanked out in the morning. You know, you're not good enough. You're a fraud. You're not worth it. You're not worth it. Not worth it. It's not going to happen. And I think if I had that voice go away, then I think that the results will be absolutely earth-shaking. Really earth-shaking. One second here. Trinity says, God tapped you on your shoulder and you said yes. Yes. Thank you, Trinity. It's exactly what happened. And you never know about these things, but maybe the reason that call went through was because instead of the next day, after this meltdown night with the voice and everything, one option for the day after that would have been to just curl up in bed and not do anything. But I just decided, I've been fighting this my whole life, and I've been medicating it. Phil says God's son died on the cross because you are worth it. Well, thank you, Phil. That's the kind of statements you've been giving me in times of crisis for 50 years now, and I just wouldn't be here without it. Tranquility Base says, I guess you don't remember, but you had hints of this at Coral Gables. No, I was a weird kid, man. I was a weird kid. So here's the facts on the ground, right? I know what I'm capable of, and I know how much I can do. I also know that the work I've done already, in my opinion, and none of you really know the depths of, no one ever knows how deep each one of us are. The only person who really knows how much depth there is to you is you. And I know that this opportunity with the colonies is been waiting for me. So I forget who it was that they mentioned this about, but somebody once said that the man and the time have met, or something like that. I've been pretty successful at what I do over the years through just grit and determination and just a fundamental optimism, just a fundamental sense that this is worth fighting for. But I've been dragging this thing around, this big. That night I thought of it as like a big black block of granite, like the monolith in 2001, except really wide. And I've been dragging this around my whole time, and I think that's why I got so upset when I felt like I'd lost that opportunity, because to me it was the chance to get really unburdened by it. And so here's what's going to happen. I'm going to talk to this guy tomorrow morning, and I'm going to find out what the earliest available is, and then I am going to come up with a plan to put the rest of this together. I don't know whether that means doing a series, like I don't know. I know this stuff is one of the things that they've said about this Ibogaine treatment after they saw the effect it had on so many veterans. One of the videos I saw was a guy who was an MMA fighter, or a guy who was associated with MMA, and he said he had taken MMA fighters with physical brain damage, with concussions that caused parts of their brain to die, and that they came out the next day essentially cured. I know that sounds miraculous, and I know it sounds like snake oil, but I also know a little bit about neuroplasticity, and I know that this. And by the way, I'm sure part of healing is to recognize that voice that I heard, that's just been such a horrible drag on my life, probably developed to protect me. That's what they usually say about these kind of things. At some point in my life, when I was 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever, it was an explanation. It was something or whatever. I don't know. Just as a quick joke to kind of wrap this up. I was watching a Louis C.K. special, and Louis C.K. is a real dark guy, and a lot about Louis C.K. not to like, but he's a genius. He's a comedy genius. And he was talking about how his parents got divorced, and he said he and his wife are getting divorced, and he said we have to explain it to the kids. So what Louis C.K. says. My wife and I, thank you, Tuesdays Avenger. Been a hot minute, but I recall a voice of my own with similar things to say. You may not imbibe, but I'll happily toast to all tonight, to hope tonight, and the ability to reliably do the impossible. Cheers and Godspeed, Bill. Thank you very much for that. Tuesdays Avenger with a $100 super chat. Thank you. Thank you very much. Louis C.K. is obviously a guy that got the same kind of problems. Louis C.K. said, So we sat our kids down, and we said, love is strange. You have a dog and you love your dog, right? You love your dog, and sometimes you'd feed the dog like pieces of ham from the table while you're having dinner, and even though we told you not to, you still did it because you really, really loved the dog. That's what love is. You really, really love the dog. but you, and even though we told you not to do it, you fed him anyway because you love the dog so much. Well, that's why your mom and I are getting divorced, because you never listened to us, ever. We're splitting up our time with you because we can't stand being with you this whole time. I love my wife very, very much, but we both decided we just would rather live apart than have you kids the whole time. And if you just listened to us, this wouldn't be happening. So obviously he's just getting a lot of laughs off of that. I thought it was really funny. But anyway, that's where things sit. And I have had moments, like after I got that electric shock when that guy made that donation, where everything was very clear to me. And the hard part is trying to decide which one is the delusion. When I'm on top of things, I think all of this, self-destructive behavior, I'm not really comfortable with that term for some reason, but I guess that's what it is. Is that the illusion, or is the illusion that I can pull off this thing the illusion? And I know the answer to that. I know what I'm capable of, and I'm really, really, really looking forward to a world where I don't have to carry this around. However, if I do this, and I thank you very much for that, John. Tell that damn voice to shut up. You'll make it through the fire and come out on the other side a better person. If I am able to come out, I almost said if I can get this done, I'm going to get it done. This is the part of me that's why we're here. That's why I'm not, a drug addict or dead or something. Because there's always been a bright kind of blue-white light inside of me that always knew what right and wrong was and knew I was here for a reason, and that this is a mission. I was put here for a reason, and this is happening later in my life than I would have liked, but it's not happening 10 years from now either. So I expect to come back and be I don't expect to be a completely different person, and I don't expect to be magically cured of all this. I don't think that all of a sudden I'm going to sit down and go, hey, let's knock off some bills. I think what's going to happen is I'm going to realize why I let papers build up on my desk, and I'm going to realize why I get distracted. Oh, look, a squirrel, and I'm going to be able to see it, and I'm going to see it and connect it to that voice, which isn't true, and once I can see it, then I can stop it. Once I can see it, I won't put off doing things like, hey, I got some people I can call, and I need to go up there and put a room together, and I need to come back with $200,000 to get this pilot made, or finished anyway, because I did that for the virtual presidency and did it in an afternoon. And earlier today, I was like, I don't even know if I can get out of the house to come here, but it's if this is real, and I believe it is real, then we should see enough of a change in my output. I don't think there'll be a big change in my personality. I really don't. I've always been a happy drunk, and I think if I can just cut this weight, just drop this empty first stage, I think we'll see things go very, very quickly, because all of the things that I've talked about, that people, well, what happened to this? What happened to this? I want to do all of them, and I can do all of them. I just can't do all of them by myself, which means staff, which means resources, and that's when the voice comes in, and that's when the voice says, no, not you, man. Not meant for you. That's not for you. That's not my voice. That's a voice that was put there through a lot of, I hate, not only do I hate it, I'm not going to use the word trauma. I reserve trauma for people who have been under artillery fire or enemy fire. But certainly there's been a lot in my life that I don't remember, that I can't see. And this Ibogaine treatment will allow me to look at it without feeling it. And once I look at all of these memories that I've repressed, entire decades of my life that are just gone, once I'm able to look at these things and see what caused all of this, then I'll be able to do on a much larger scale what I did that next morning which is when I woke up and said, I'm not going to let this voice destroy my life. I'm just not. So there you go. And I think that's about it. Those of you who've been watching live, most people watch this show on YouTube after it's been recorded. But the people who have been commenting live during this entire 1 hour adventure have been the most supportive and the most decent, generous people I've ever met. The measure of my worth and ability as a professionally, not so much as an individual, is the quality of the people that have been fans and have been fans for a long time. I've never seen a better group of people. I've seen bigger groups of people, but never seen a better group of people than the people who have either been members or come to the Stratosphere Lounge and all the rest of that stuff. So I could have done all this in private. I owed it to all of you who've wondered. My hope is when I come back, bill time will be a thing of the past. There won't be any more talking about things that I'm going to do that don't get done. They're not going to, that's not how it's going to work. It's going to be, here's something I've done. What do you think? Because I love this stuff. I love it, and I can't stop ideas that just keep coming and coming and coming. So I'm ditching this first stage. It's empty. It's dead weight. It's going into the ocean where it belongs, and I hope to see a real big improvement. Next Thursday, I'll tell you how it went with the thing. Great White Buffalo says, I have a consultation in August. Is that for the same place, Buffalo? Tranquility Base, you're a fine fellow. And I guess the reason I'd like to close this with the way I opened it, Winston Churchill and Abraham Lincoln, neither of whom I am fit to associate in the same sentence with, both overcame this crippling disease, this condition. Lincoln called it the tired spot. Thank you, Curlin. Hey, maybe I'll see you down there, pal. Or at the very least, I can give you a review. I think it would be of interest to people if somebody articulate could explain what this treatment does. And this might be enough to get me on the Joe Rogan show. Because this medication and this entire family of medications was put off the table, made illegal by Nixon, because he associated it, in many cases fairly enough, with the anti-war movement, because a bunch of hippies were doing LSD just to see the, to see the music. And there were a lot of overdoses, and a lot of people went nuts because LSD is a chemical, synthetic chemical, is made in a lab. And Timothy Leary telling people to tune in, turn on, and drop out, that didn't help any. I remember being a kid hearing this and thinking, this guy's a freaking nut. And how many people died as a result of that? I wonder how many addicts or people died as a result of this. And I keep saying I'm going to close, but just as a thought, if this stuff that God put on this earth is able to do what it can do, it is not a Band-Aid. It just plain cures. And how many drug addicts out there, how many crazy homeless people out there, and first and foremost in my list always, how many of the veterans that kill themselves every day, how many of them could we save? How many Vietnam vets died as a result of this? How many guys from Iraq and Afghanistan, how many of these soldiers have died because of things that they had to go through for their country, when if it turns out that this would have actually just plain cured them, it's enough to make me a little nuts. But I think that in order for this to become popular, somebody needs to be able to explain what it does, and it needs to be somebody who's gone through it and not somebody doing a report for 60 minutes. Okay, Great White Buffalo, I'm with you, brother. And I'll be looking for you at the Every Stratosphere Lounge from now on that you can make it. Hang on one second. Hang on, everybody just hold the phone for 1 second. Just give me 1 minute here. Sorry. Okay, so that's that. I had something else. That's the end of this particular segment. Thank you for the support as always. It's been tremendous, just really tremendous. I really appreciate it. I was going to talk. I had something else to talk about that's not this on a political front. I don't know whether we should do that or whether we should just jump to the questions. And thank you again for all of the prayers and the words and all of this stuff. Yeah, I'll save this thing for next Thursday. And by the way, guys, just talking about this has done me so much good. You have no idea how much better I feel now than I did at 4 o'clock this afternoon, honestly. And if you've never been to an NA meeting or an AA meeting, this is it. People come in and they talk about their problems as honestly as they can, and they get honest feedback. They don't just get lots of, go slay Bill. It's just wonderful. Just the human connection is just wonderful. And I keep coming back to it again and again and again and again and again. But the absolute essence of the colonies is this human connection, this absolute human connection that we're being, I think, intentionally deprived of, and we're not going to let that happen. So anyway, thank you, all of you, from the bottom of my heart for your support over the years and for your support tonight especially. And I hope to have some good news tomorrow. And we'll see where it goes from there. If anybody happens to know how to reach the Joe Rogan Show, if they could send that to info@billwhittle.com, I might put the bug in his head early. I think there's a pretty good chance he knows who I am, at least has heard of me at some degree. And I know this is his issue, so maybe I'll give him an email and see what we say. All right, let's go ahead and do some questions. And again, I cannot thank all of you enough. I'm just very touched and I just feel so much better. It's not easy to talk about those things, but that's why we repress them, and that's why we carry all of this weight and all of this pain and all of this guilt and shame. And it destroys our lives, and it shouldn't do that anymore. All right, here we go. We're moving on. Thanks, kids. Thank you again. We know stuff the voice obviously never noticed. Bill, you got this. Thank you. P7. Yeah, I mean to kick its ass. I'll probably end up thanking it for the work it did for me when I was 4, and I haven't really needed this advice anymore since I've for the last 60 years. So thanks for the help, and you can go now. So we'll see. All right. Anyway, thanks again. Let's see what we got. Marusha Dark, we got a Jacob Belcheck, we got a capital G Geek, a Road Rider, broke college student, Road Runner, Bob Neef, Jamold, that's a new name, I think, Eric Blake. All right, we get through those. I'll make it a little spiffy. But thanks to all of you, and Phil and Bobby, if you're still watching, more than anybody. Chase Smith says, Bill, have you thought about going to local McDonald's early in the morning, get a cup of coffee with a group of men gathered around there at that time? I think you're about that age, right? Yeah, I'm old enough to remember when McDonald's put a sign out front on how many hamburgers they sold. SPC 6991 says, hi, Bill, have you read the Bible? I have. And when I talk about the education I got as a child growing up, I got a pretty decent religious background. We were Church of England in Bermuda, and I've never gone back to Bermuda since I left in 1972, and I'm planning on taking Natasha there on the 10-year anniversary of me proposing to her, which will be August 6th. So I've been actually looking at that. Haven't told her yet because I've made too many promises that I haven't kept. I know she's out tonight, so she's not likely to see this. She's with her friend from Orange County. But I'm really looking forward to going back. I'm waiting for them to reopen the hotel that my dad opened. It was the Southampton Princess in 1972. It's now the Fairmont Southampton. They closed it 4 years ago, and then they've been doing a $500 million renovation. And I sent some emails saying, hey, when do you guys reopen? Haven't heard back from them, but I'm going there if I can, one way or another. So I got a lot of work to do. All right, here we go. Mercia Dark, topic, patch release. Mr. Virtual President, you've just been given the unprecedented opportunity to craft 2 new constitutional amendments. Oh, good. My two new amendments will be to revoke 2 amendments. But go ahead. The first would tackle the problem of radical Islam. The second would tackle the problem of communism, socialism, and progressivism. How would you word each of these such that they pass constitutional muster before SCOTUS? And what would your pitch be to Congress to get them to sign off on these bills, given that they require a supermajority to pass as amendments? Assume for the sake of this thought experiment that it is something more robust than communism is hereby abolished, as that's vague and runs afoul of First Amendment challenges. At the risk of sacrificing some of the questions tonight, this is so close to what I wanted to talk about and said I'll save till next week that I'm just going to go into this in some real depth. All right. One second. I want to address this because it's something I wanted to talk about earlier. So I just had to make a quick note. So here's what we're going to do. I really want to get into this, and because I want to get into this, I've given it some thought for the preamble. So everybody, stay with me here. It's clear that the social fabric of the West is falling apart, and it's also clear that it's suicide. It's clear that there's people in power who have either hated Western civilization, either been holding out since the fall of communism, or they're, whatever the case may be. Starmer is the first guy that comes to mind, but there's no question that there is an enormous drift and change in our society. So let me, like I said, I gave this a lot of thought. I see a lot of videos about people misbehaving and so on, and like any other human, it's easy for me to generalize and see things in patterns and so on. So let me just start by saying this, okay? And this is the most important thing I'm going to say about this, because I think we need to really come to grips with this. And if we don't get to the moral basis of this, then we have no chance to succeed, and we don't deserve to succeed. There are people out there who have no concern for other people's lives. They have no concern for other people's property. They laugh at stealing. They laugh when they punch people in the face on the subway. They think it's hilarious. There are people who have come to this country and Western Europe out of the kindness and the largesse and the morality and the Christian decency of the populations of those countries, and they have done everything in their power to not only take advantage of those systems, but to mock the people who have set it up and and have shown nothing but hatred towards the society. There are obviously some groups in the world, in terms of Islam or inner black cities or whatever, where you see more cases of this. But the most important thing that I can say today, and you have to listen to me very carefully, is this. This is not, I'm not saying it's not based on race. I'm not saying it's not based on religion. I'm not saying any of that. Here's what I am saying. There are good and bad people of all different groups. And so I am going to come up with a word. And the word I'm going to come up with for these people who break the law, who murder people without remorse, who've been arrested 50 or 60 times, who come here and demand that we obey Sharia law, people who do any form of intentional evil. They're all different colors, they're all different religions, and I am going to refer to them as Smurfs. Okay? I'm talking about Smurfs because the danger here is to assume that the problem is entirely a black problem or an Islamic problem or a Hispanic problem or a white racism problem or whatever. I'm just going to say there's going to be Smurfs and non-Smurfs. And the Smurfs are the people who cannot or will not live in a society by following the law and the rules of that society. They are fundamentally immoral. There may be many, many, many reasons why this is, but that no longer matters to me. The fact of the matter is that the Smurfs are making life more and more and more unbearable for the rest of us. And they are going to take over Europe, and they will eventually take over America if we don't decide to do something about the Smurfs. I've seen plenty of really white people who have done all of these welfare frauds and all of these traffic road rage things. It's just Smurfs. So what do you do about the Smurfs? The big danger is that taking action against the Smurfs, which needs to be done, can be done in a way that is either so unfair or so brutal that it destroys our moral base and our country's moral superiority, because we've earned that. It also means there's a tremendous danger in including perfectly innocent people and putting them in the same category as Smurfs when they certainly don't deserve to be there. I've said many times before, I know it sounds like hyperbole, but I would much rather live in a nation of 350 million Thomas Sowells and be the only white face in this country than what I'm doing right now. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. From the bottom of my heart. So anybody who thinks that I'm using code language to talk about anything other than people who intentionally either break the law, steal, assume that they have the right to other people's money and all the rest of it, those are the people I'm talking about. It's clear that that one of the qualities of the Smurfs is that they are not either willing or able to survive in a high trust society. A high trust society is a society that leaves candy out on Halloween that says honor system, please take no more than 2. And these are the people that come up and dump the bowl into their bags and go running off. That's what a Smurf is. And that's about as clear a picture as you need. People who just walk into stores and steal, they talk about fatigue and all of this stuff. All of the, and I mean this term liberal, not so much even in a Republican Democratic sense. I mean, when I'm about to say liberal, I mean liberal in terms of what it used to mean. Generosity, willingness to tolerate people who are different than us and so on. Yes, exactly right. Roadrunner says, to Smurfs, a high trust society is a bunch of suckers. Yes. And so if you allow the Smurfs to continue, then the high trust society has to disappear, because for the same reason that all of these stores are leaving areas that have high Smurf populations. You cannot run a store where people can just come in and steal things. It just can't be done. And so all of civilization will end if we let the Smurfs have their way. We have to not only fight them, we have to defeat them, and we have to, when I say get rid of them, I mean we have to live in a world that is free of them. Okay? We have to live in a world, high trust people are rare on this planet. High trust societies and civilizations are rare on this planet. And we had no problem understanding this 60, 70 years ago. We had fought a bitter, bitter war with Germany and Japan, a vicious war filled with visceral hatred, but Germany and Japan as nations both turned out to be nations that were not Smurf nations. That's why the war was so devastating. The war was so devastating, World War II was so devastating, was because all of the major combatants, with the possible exception of the USSR, were highly developed countries with tremendously advanced social systems and technologies. But post-war, Japan is a civilized country. Germany has been a civilized country, but they've allowed so many Smurfs in there now that this has ruined everything. France is no longer France. Paris is no longer Paris. London is no longer London. Why do we allow this to happen? And the only reason we can come up with is guilt. It's guilt. It's guilt that has been inculcated and manipulated by people. The chiefs of the Smurfs, who are actually not stupid, have decided that if they can Smurfify the world, they can take power over these civilizations, and they don't care if it ruins the civilizations because they don't believe in an afterlife or justice or anything. They simply are in it for themselves. That's the definition of a Smurf. They're in it for themselves. They cannot get past that level 2 or level 3 thinking where they even understand that other people have needs, let alone all the rest of this stuff. A few nights in the plan of trunk or treat events, replacing trunk or treat events. So we have shown, as a species, we have shown that certainly since the late 1700s, that it is possible to live in a high trust society, and everything good that has happened to the world has come from those high trust societies, from Western civilization. And it is under desperate attack because we produce so much wealth and so much security that it is attractive to everybody. And the problem is that we allow people who don't want to play by the rules to come in and completely screw up the system. And this is exactly it. So what do we do about this? I don't think I'm alone in feeling like that the race card has run out of funds. I really should say the victim card. That'd be a little more accurate, I think. I don't think any of us are unaware of the fact that that there are people who are honestly, genuinely buying Mercedes-Benzes on government benefits, and that the amount of fraud in the government is so massive that we can't put a finger on it. I think if we look at how the federal government spends money, that if we got rid of the Smurfs, we could run this government easily on less than $1 trillion instead of $4 trillion, and I think we probably could do it for less than that. In fact, I think if we had a government that was completely immune to Smurfs and the votes that they produce, we probably could run this government at a profit, which is a revolutionary thought. In other words, we could run a government that actually made money and banked money so that every year that went by, instead of us paying more and more taxes to pay off a debt that gets us nothing, every year we'd be able to pay fewer and fewer taxes because the amount of capital that the government had in reserve would be doing all the heavy lifting for us. That would be, in fact, free healthcare. It wouldn't be all healthcare has to be paid for, but it would be government healthcare issued to private people out of interest from the surplus. That's possible. So that's the easy part. The hard part is, what do you do about this? And now we come to the defining issue, because it's not only what constrains our choices, it's also what makes our identity, and finally, it's this issue that allows the Smurfs to get away with it in the first place. We are a extraordinary, despite what people say about white supremacy and all the rest of this, racism, colonialization, all of this stuff. It has been the largesse and the generosity of white people throughout Europe and North America to open their doors to people, because decent people feel sympathy for people who are suffering, for people who are poor, people or whatever. And the great experiment that has happened since World War II, which I would be willing to concede, I'm not saying this is the case, but I'd be willing to concede the possibility that this was in fact intended in the best possible light. This experiment has failed. There's no question it's failed. Multiculturalism and the idea that you can have several competing, diametrically opposed religions or social norms doesn't work. I think it's fair to say that after the war, the belief was, if we had institutions like the United Nations would raise the barbarous nations and the uncivilized nations up to the level of Western nations. I think that was the intention of the United Nations, and I think for probably 10 years you could say that this was all worth the effort. And all of these programs in Africa and all of these, relief, all of this stuff. But it's clearly failed. And there's a lot of reasons why it's failed. So, my definition of a Smurf would be somebody who is unwilling to obey the law, scoffs at the law, thinks people who follow the law are just schmucks, and are unwilling to conform not to a universal mind think, not to a universal religion, but unwilling to conform to the idea of a land of laws that are applicable to everybody. So that's the enemy. So what do we do about him? Well, the first thing you can do is kill him, I guess. We've seen how that worked in the past. The Nazis thought that the Jews were Smurfs, and so they just killed them. I don't want to go down that road. I think I'm going to give you two versions of this that I've given some thought to the last couple days. One of them has to do with removing the Smurfs from the non-Smurfs, and the other one has to do with removing the non-Smurfs from the Smurfs. The hard one is the first one. I have thought that the only moral path for this is a form of exile. So just hear me out with this. I think people have repeatedly shown that they don't care about the law, other people's lives, other people's anything. I think those people need to be sent away someplace. And I think as a rich society, we should be willing to airdrop the fundamentals of life. And when I say airdrop, that's what I mean. I don't mean going in there and policing them. We've had this opportunity to do this in cities. Nope. I'm saying that if you have failed that test repeatedly, because everybody makes mistakes, but if you failed that test repeatedly, the ideal situation for me would be, we will, at our expense, take you someplace where you can go and live with other people who also don't hold the law with any regard, and you can go live in a world where everybody is in it for themselves. And that seems to me to be a perfectly moral way to protect the good people without killing people, without anything. All we're saying is You cannot live with us. You've made that clear. John Pershing says Coventry. You've made it clear that not only can you not live with us, you don't want to live with us. You hate us. We've done nothing but provide these benefits for you, and the more we do for you, the more you hate us. So we are not willing to shut down all of our department stores and all of this. We're only going to deal with the people who are a problem, which is actually a pretty small, relatively small number, right? So what we'll do is we will set you up on an island or someplace like this. We've got a lot of money as a company, as a country rather, a lot of money. We just go buy someplace, like, I don't know. I don't want to say Madagascar because that has some nasty connotations with what the Nazis were going to do. But I really do think that one opportunity is to simply say, since you have shown you cannot live with us, and that you hate us, and that you have no appreciation for all of the stuff that we've done for you, and you just keep wanting more, we are going to send you someplace where if you don't want to work, you don't have to work. We will drop food supplies in sufficient to keep you fed, but how that gets distributed is up to you, because we're not going in there to hand it out to the right people. And I think once you set up Smurfland, the results would be so horrifying that not many people would want to go to Smurfland. And the thing about that makes me feel okay morally is that, hey man, we didn't do anything. We just plain gave you the ability to go and live the life that you say you want to live, which is all about you. Eric says, lest we forget, disturbance of the peace is a crime you can be arrested for. These Smurfs are all about disturbing the peace. Yes. So I think it should be made clear that basically 3 strikes and you're out. And depending on the strike, obviously. 3, disorderly conducts is one thing. 3 murders is something else. You murder somebody, you are going to Smurf Island. Premeditated murder, you're going to Smurf Island. And I think it should be treated as a prison sentence. But I do know that letting people live, letting people have the consequences of their actions be responsible for their punishment seems to me to be morally fair. We're not killing anybody. We're not ethnically cleansing anybody. We're simply saying you have repeatedly shown that you are not fit to live with us, and for our protection, you are going to go live over here. And since you can't take care of yourselves, we will take care of you. We will do that because of our own moral obligation to ourselves, not to you, but we will not allow you to live with us anymore. And so you can go to Smurf Island. And then, there we go. AKA Woody Fool says, what will we do with the Smurf allies? Well, I worry deeply, like I say, about things like ideology tests, and I worry about what happens if the power structure, changes and so on. But I'm sure, like many of you, I'm 67, 6'7", and I have never been arrested. I've never been convicted of a misdemeanor. Now, with that said, I don't think that a misdemeanor conviction should be enough to kick you onto Smurf Island. People do stupid things. There have been times when I was younger when I drove when I had too much to drink. I got lucky because I didn't get caught or hurt anybody. But I'm willing to understand that people make mistakes, and I'm willing to understand that that these have to be factored in. But at no point in my life did I ever say, to hell with this society. I can do whatever I want to. So that would involve reimmigration of virtually everybody who's come to this country in the last 20 or 30 years. That's not entirely fair to say. Certainly seems to be true for much of Britain. But anytime I see anybody doing things like, let's take something really minor, okay? I saw a video the other day where it was a fountain at a mall, just a little fountain, and people had flipped coins in there like we always did and always have done because it's good luck. Is it superstition? Yes, but it's a charming superstition. Feels nice. It's got a nice feel to it. And I saw a family of Hindus that were just in the fountain collecting the money. That's your first notification. We don't do that here. So, that's a relatively minor thing. Nobody really got hurt, but they get a significant case in front of a judge where they are told, look, this is intentional and clearly selfish at the expense of the society that has allowed you in here. So that's strike one. And then you just simply do that and you enforce it. Now, there's no way to round up the Smurfs and put them someplace else without a great deal of violence. I mean, a great deal of violence. And you could make the case, and I think I would be willing to make the case, that in a fight for Western civilization, we took, 500,000 killed in World War II? Right? 500,000 soldiers died in World War II to save the civilization. We're in a fight for our lives, and to think we can get out of that cheaply is not true. So we can pick this up next time, but that's one option. The second option is, instead of getting the Smurfs away from us, we get away from the Smurfs. And that seems to be a lot more doable. My feeling was that Florida seems to be the most conservative state in the nation now. And I have, as a person who doesn't live in Florida, who did, but I have no problem at all, none, there's obviously enormous legal problems, but as a person, I have no problem at all by me saying I want to move to Florida because it's safer and it's much more orderly, and I have no problem at all with the state of Florida doing a background check on me to see whether or not I had a criminal background and whether or not they wanted to let me in. I'm not saying that this would have to be adjudicated by an individual. I'm just saying it would be possible for the state, and I understand that there's a major constitutional issue here, but it seems reasonable to me that the state of Florida could basically say, if you have a felony record of multiple convictions, you cannot live here. If we find you here, I'm not going to put up a checkpoint or anything. If we find you here and you didn't get here by passing this test, then we're going to throw you in our jail for a long time. And that means no driver's license or so on. You get pulled over and you're a Smurf where you're not supposed to be a Smurf, then you just go to jail. And if we have to build a lot of jails, then I'm fine with that. We've got the money, it's fine. This applies to anybody, and it doesn't matter what they look like. When you see, I think the only thing that would drive me insane would be, really genuinely drive me insane, would be if I found out that somebody I loved was murdered by somebody who had been arrested 40 times in the past. I wouldn't be angry at that person. I would be going for the judges that allowed that to happen. That's where my fury would be directed. Because this is just the reality of what we're going to have to face. And to me, I think this Smurf kind of designation is perfectly fair. It's got nothing to do with what you look like. It's got nothing to do with your religion or where you come from. If you continue to break the law, or if your behavior continues to be disruptive and which usually means breaking the law, or disrespectful of the culture, then no. And these guys that are getting these truck drivers who get their commercial driver's licenses from some agency someplace, and they don't know how to drive, and they go out and wreck a car, wreck a thing. If it could be shown that that person was just negligent driving that truck, then they should be on a plane by the end of the day. You are going home and you are never coming back. anybody who's been caught doing those kind of things, anybody who's been accused of violent behavior, and by violent behavior I mean harassing behavior. You see this more in Europe than you see here, because number one, we're not quite as candy ass as the Republic as the Europeans, and we never have been. But when you see these women walking down the street and some immigrant from someplace is like a foot behind her, constantly telling her that that she needs to come home with him because he has his needs. Dude, you're on a plane. You're out of here. You're done. And the sooner we come to grips with this, the easier it will be. It's already 3 decades too late, so it's not going to be easy. It's going to be the most difficult thing we've done as a country since World War II. But at some point, we have to come up with a method that allows us to be the good guys because we are good guys, right? We are good guys. I don't want innocent people of any color or religion sent away if they're here to work hard and to love this country and to follow its laws. Good enough for me, but I am not going to be part of anything that punishes innocent individuals for the crimes of the group, because I'm an individualist, and that's what America is a place for individualism to live. And, refusing to get off an airplane when you've been told by the flight attendants or the captains, maybe it'd be a point system or something, that should be a lot of, say you needed 100 points before you got sent to Smurf Island. And let's say that murder or rape convictions, automatically 100 points. Destroying or defacing public works, maybe that's 10 points, 20 points. But getting into a fight on an airplane or something like that should be 50 points. And I'd even be willing to allow these things to roll over time, because some people can change, and if it turned out that you had a lot of Smurf points but you didn't do anything for 20 years, 25 years, I'm fine with that too. I want to be fair. But I also don't want to be impotent or inert, because the society will not do it. Steve Whoop says a social credit score. No, it's not a social credit score, Steve. When I hear that term, it makes my skin crawl. I'm not saying we keep track of what people do that's good and bad. What I'm saying is we keep track of the amount of crimes that a person has committed, and we make them responsible. It's got nothing to do with the social credit score. It's got nothing to do with what they say. They can say whatever they want to. They have freedom of speech. It's just how many crimes have you committed within a period of time, and how severe are those crimes. And if it turns out that you are simply not willing to do it. I saw a courtroom video of a woman who was sentenced to 15 years in prison for drunk driving, and it was only her 10th offense. 10th offense. She had been convicted of driving under the influence 10 times before she was put away for 15 years. I would give somebody a chance, and I might, for something like that, depending on how far off they were, give them a second chance. But honestly, this is not a person, they're just not, no, they're not. So, I don't know. Sending people to jail doesn't seem to help. The guy who stabbed that Ukrainian woman on the train was on his 44th offense. Robert, and by the way, Robert Bodish says we used to have 3 strike laws. What happened to those? When did those disappear? Because I remember those. Now all of a sudden we just don't. Woody Fool says if you sneak into the USA, you've used up all your Justice Once credits. I agree. It's like you're starting off. The second you step across the line, that's your first act in this country is a criminal offense. No, goodbye. Democrats happen. That's really true. It'd be interesting to write a history of the United States without the Democratic Party. It really would be quite shocking, I think. I mean, the Civil War was the Democratic Party leaving the Union. The Confederacy was the Democratic Party leaving the Union. So I don't know what it's going to take, but I do get the feeling, I don't think we're close yet, but there's no question that we are heading in that direction, that the law-abiding people of this country are out of patience with it, that nobody buys the "I had a disadvantaged childhood" anymore. Nobody buys it. Nobody is willing and nobody's buying, some 400-pound woman who's saying, they're taking away my food stamps, I'm going to starve. You don't look like you're starving, and the future, not just of America, but the future of the species, is going to depend on whether or not we can muster the moral courage to do what we need to do, or whether it's going to have to go completely down to, zombie apocalypse, burning, rats on sticks, over burning tires for dinner in the cities. At which point the non-Smurfs will rebuild everything, and then we'll get serious about it. But I'd like to avoid it getting that bad if I can help it. So I just think that that the punishment on some level should be, you are condemned to spend the rest of your life among people who behave exactly as you do. For the immigrants that can't seem to avoid raping Western women, you go right back to where you came from. And if somebody kills a goose out of a duck pond to take it home and eat dinner, it's like you are halfway on the way home. This kind of thing again, you're it. I saw something in Texas on the number of H-1B visas that they allowed to have. Northern Texas now is apparently just completely overrun by Indian immigrants who are just not being hired by anybody. They're all getting their own jobs and scams, and trillions of dollars that we all have to pay in taxes. It just goes to this. It's insanity. And I don't know why. I mean, I know why, and I even know how, but I am amazed at how effective the left has been at making the idea of defending your civilization reprehensible to the people in that civilization. That is quite an achievement. You are a reprehensible person if you say, I want to live in a law-abiding society, and the people who don't need to go. That's the power of mass media, folks. Jacob Belchek. Hail, Bill. Apologies for my absence. Yeah, we missed you, Jacob. I'm on track to finish my PhD this year, so my time has been in great demand. Hooray! It's one of those doctors and engineers, but turns out this one is really one of them. I enjoyed your lecture on Bill's Dating Academy a couple weeks back, but I have new data for you to consider. There's been a poll going around that says about 70% of men 18 to 30 have a favorable view of women. I don't blame them one bit. That's actually much higher than I thought it would be. Meanwhile, about 50% of women that age have a favorable view of men. And when you separate that down to women under 25, only about 30% of them have a favorable view of men. This may be changing for the under 18s, of course, but I don't have data for that. Does this adjust your calculus for the dating problem? At the risk of sounding like a broken record, things are not the same as they were when you were a young man. The average young woman is actively predisposed against men now. I was not alive before feminism really kicked off, but my sense is that this is a relatively new condition. What say you? I say you're absolutely right. There's no question that the odds were much better when I was growing up. I think the odds of finding a decent, just a decent woman who appreciates men is much smaller than it used to be, but it's certainly not zero. And my dating academy advice would be, if you encounter the first whiff of men are useless, then it is time to get the hell out of there, buddy. And she will then live with the consequences of her decision and her rhetoric, and she will die alone. And it's a, in my opinion, an absolutely, and I think the evidence for this is overwhelming. It is an absolutely undeniable biological truth that men can get along without women better than women can get along without men. You look at men's magazines, they're about all the different kinds of things, hunting and sports and all these other things. Women's magazines are exclusively about how to deal with men, how to attract men, why they hate men, and so on. And they know on some level, whether they admit it or not, they know that that's how this relationship works. It's not even the nuance about timing and age and so on. It is clear to them, and they are deeply concerned about this men going their own way, death of chivalry thing. They should be concerned about it. Women who have nothing but contempt for men don't deserve chivalry, and aren't going to get it. And any woman who says, I am the table, I am the prize, I don't have to do anything, I just have to show up. In fact, not only do I just not have to do anything, but you have to pay for my makeup and all of this other stuff in advance, run for the hills. These are people who are incurably infected by a hate-filled ideology that was largely put together by either lesbians or women with very, very serious mental issues about men. And men, as always, have been tolerant of it. White men in this country, generally speaking, have just allowed feminism to happen because we're fundamentally fair-minded. It's like, okay, if that's how you want to live your life, great. You want to have your own jobs and your own businesses, that's fine. If that's what you really want, you can have it. But the days of us doing the heavy lifting for you were the days when we got something back. And if we're not only not getting anything back, but we're getting nothing but mockery, scorn, derision, and hatred, then you can lift this, and you can build that cabinet, and you can dig that pit, and all the rest of this stuff. And reality will disabuse you of this illusion that you've been allowed to live in. I sometimes see what's been kind of hot lately is a number of videos have come out from feminists saying that women no longer need men because they figured out a way to create another set of genetic material. Essentially, it's like they've been able to figure out a way to create sperm from a woman's bone marrow. So they say we don't need men anymore. We can just breed ourselves, and the only thing that we ever needed men for was insemination for children, and now we don't even need that anymore. So men are doomed. Your time is running out, fellas, because we women don't need you for anything anymore, as if they had built and maintained everything. I don't think it's a Survivor episode, Kirk. I think it's Bear Grylls episode about women on an island and men on an island. It is, if I were to write that episode as a piece of fiction to show how much more capable men are of not only doing the dirty work, but doing virtually everything, I would not have gone as far as they went in that episode, because in that episode, the difference between the men and the women was so shocking that it really was, it defied belief. Within 3 days, the women were starving, they were dehydrated, they were the producers had to constantly just keep feeding stuff into them and dropping off food. And the men were not only surviving and surviving well, like eating luxuriously. The thing that's most remarkable to me about that, with the men all on one island and the women on the other, is not how much better the men did in terms of survival. The thing that struck me the most was how happy the guys were. They were having the time of their lives. They would put together, they'd create a net out of, I don't know what, old clothes or something, And they'd just take this net out there in this bay, and they'd come back with like 4 fish like this big. And these guys are high-fiving each other, and they're just partying, man. They're just having a blast. And the women are starving, and they're miserable, and they're sick. But these guys were having a blast. And I just enjoyed that so much, because not so much that I watched the women being miserable, although they deserved it. The thing I enjoyed about it so much was just how much fun they were having. How much fun they were having. They were having a lot of fun. I saw this one thing on X the other day, and it was a woman, I think it was a black woman, saying women have to put up with periods, raising kids, discrimination in the workplace, this whole list of feminine complaints. Women have to put up with all of this. What do men have to put up with? And I went in there to make a reply, and I'd already been beaten by 700 people, and the answer was, men have to put up with women. And it shouldn't be this way. Natasha and I don't have that kind of relationship. She does what she's good at. I do what I'm good at, and it's a great partnership. And there's very little conflict. But she's not from here, so in answer to your question, Jacob, yes, I'm sure it's worse than I make it out, but there are plenty of good women out there, and there are lots of people in the gray zone, a lot of women in the gray zone, who have never had a strong man approach them, and I think if they actually had that, they would be, I think they'd be loving it. One of my favorite videos was of a woman who said she grew up as a like this rabid feminist, and then she met this man that she really loved, and she said, I could feel the feminism leaving my body. She said, when he comes home, I just want to feed him. I want to feed him. I want to make him comfortable. I want to relax him. I want to massage his muscles. I just want to do these things for him. And I thought, there's a win. There's a win. That's how it's supposed to be. Because that guy is coming back from work because he wants his wife to have nice things. I saw another one that was actually really interesting. I think I mentioned this a week ago or two. And it basically said, if you take a single man and you give him like a 1-bedroom apartment and a decent couch and a TV, maybe to some place to play some video games or something, most men don't really need much more than that. And I really think that's true, All of that work for like the vacations and the kids and the nicer house and the buying the vacuum thing or the art or what, almost all of the work that men do, they do for their family. If you just take that off the table, guys they're pretty happy, pretty happy. There you go. Darth Chuck the Merciless says, Eagle Scout here. I did not know that about you, Darth Chuck, or if I did, I'd forgotten it. But amen, brother, you have just stood out from the crowd. Eagle Scouts are the most anti-Smurf people on the planet. And I would, what's a double eagle? I've never heard of such a thing. And he said, Scouting USA is a disaster, cluster F, waiting for EMS to scrape the remains off the gravel road. Yes. And just look at what happened to the Boy Scouts of America. These feminists cannot handle being told no. You cannot be a part of this. Why? Because this is for men. We have no problem with this is a woman's only gym. If you had a men's only gym, there'd be a huge line outside. They're covetous. I was looking for that word and it flew right into my head. They are covetous. Anybody ever see, I'm not a big fan of, what's his name? Bill, comedian who died many years ago. Anyway, he's saying, I can explain modern women to you in a nutshell. He says, there we were in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, and Adam turns to Eve, and Adam says, Eve, isn't this unbelievable? We live in perfect health, in perfect climate. We have no diseases. We have no needs. Anything we could want is granted to us. Our lives are absolutely idyllic and perfect. And Eve says, yeah, just isn't enough, is it? And Bill, what's his name? Anyway. So look, man, I completely agree that the chance of finding a decent, virtuous woman is a lot lower than it used to be. And that's the reality of it. But I would point out that the flip side of the Bill Whittle Dating Academy would say that since those are the women that are worth having, knowing how to make them happy goes an awful long way for you ending up in a world that's a much better world than you would have been in by yourself. Darth Chuck says Eagle Scout used to mean something. No, it wasn't Bill involved. It was he's been dead for quite a long time. He's very cynical. I can't stand him, frankly. But Bill Hicks, thanks. Yeah. I had always had the highest regard for Eagle Scouts, but when my all-time hero in life, when I found out he wrote a letter to every single Eagle Scout in the country, then that elevated Eagle Scout to mythical heights in my mind, and that'd be, of course, Neil Armstrong. So there you go. Okay. Capital G Geek. Greetings from swamps of Northern Virginia. I've had my issues with Daily Wire since Shapiro and Clavin didn't see issues with the 2020 election. Yeah, it kind of bothered me too. So it doesn't really bother me to hear reports that their financial problems haven't been fixed. They laid off all of Bentkey last month and a lot of home office staff last week. Now might be a good time to reach out and ask someone about how much it would cost to buy the rights for your What We Saw series. At least get a price from them and maybe open negotiations with. Who knows? You might even be able to crowdfund it. As it turns out, Capital G Geek, I had a thought about that struck me like another lightning bolt. It was about a week ago. I did 4 series for Daily Wire. I did Apollo 11, What We Saw, Cold War, What We Saw, America's Forgotten Heroes, and An Empire of Terror. And we shot video for all of those. But the video for America's Forgotten Heroes was scrapped by Jeremy because he thought that it didn't look good enough, and I thought he was right. All of the other sets were fantastic. America's Forgotten Heroes was done just before they left LA. It looked kind of cheesy, and so America's Forgotten Heroes was released as audio only. What I would like to do with Daily Wire is I would like to see if there was a way to revenue share America's Forgotten Heroes only and do the whole series with AI video. Because now I can make John Paul Jones, who looks like John Paul Jones. I can have the actual battles at sea. I can do, and the reason I got this idea was because I wanted to do Taffy 3 so much. I just constantly want to do Taffy 3. I think we've got the technology to keep those ships consistent now, so that, so that there's a consistent, so that the Johnston looks like the Johnston from every angle and so on. In fact, I know I can do that now. I know I can. And I wanted to do a test and just kind of send it to Daily Wire and talk about Taffy 3. And I realized I already wrote Taffy 3. And not only did I already write Taffy 3, what ended up being aired for all of America's Forgotten Heroes, what ended up airing was about 1/3 of the total scripts. And I thought, this would make great homeschooling stuff. It's been out there for 5 years now, in podcast form only. If I had the resources, and I'm hoping that when I come back from brain rewiring experiment, that I can raise the money to get an actual studio together. Because if I had the capital in the bank, I would go to them immediately and say, "You've got the audio. I'll provide the money for the video. We do a revenue share of the video only, 50/50, whatever the deal is, and we do it, either put it on YouTube or we do it as homeschooling or both." And I think that would be great. I could tell all of those stories. Good night, Great White. Good to see you. I could tell all of those stories in AI. I could tell Booker T. Washington. I could do all of them, and really do them amazingly well. But that's an hour each, and that's a lot of video. So, but I mean, just think about it. I could do John Paul Jones. I could do Frank Luke, just a bit of Frank Luke, and then I've got a 5-part miniseries on Frank Luke that is going to get made someday. I swear to God, it's just a question of getting the resources, and that's not a trivial thing. But with the amount of money that gets spent on things, I can do a 5-part miniseries on Frank Luke. The hard part is already done. It's written, and in the Frank Luke thing, Frank Luke will look exactly like Frank Luke, and John Paul Jones will look like John Paul Jones. And I really, really want to do the Jimmy Doolittle one, and I want to go back to the original script for that, which again was 2 or 3 times as long. There's lots and lots of cool stuff that didn't make it into the final version of that. For instance, the Doolittle raid was Army pilots in B-25s taking off from Navy carriers. And that alone is interesting. When they were training for this, they were training somewhere out like in Maryland or something. And they had a little runway marked off that was the size of the flight deck. And these Army pilots were trying to get these B-25s. They waited until they had, I don't know what they needed, 20 knots of headwind, whatever the carrier can make. But they had to wait, and the Army pilots just couldn't get it done. They just kept overrunning the end of the runway no matter how hard they tried because they were taking off like Army pilots. And finally they got a Navy guy, and here's what was happening with the B-25s were the guys were behind the controls there, right? They get the wave, right? They're ready, and they release the brakes, they go to full power, they wait till they get to flying speed, trying to rotate, and they're off the deck. They're in the water. And a Navy guy came in, and the Navy guy, he did this on the first try. Navy guy he'd never been behind the controls of a B-25 before. And all of these Army guys had failed, and it looks like the mission isn't going to go. And the Navy guy says, all right, here we go. He says to the co-pilot, help me with the brakes, and they stand on the brakes. The pedals on a aircraft control the rudder, but usually the toe brakes are pushing at the top of those, and you can also differentially brake with this. Hey, Nathaniel, how are you? Doing well. Been an interesting show. You should go back and watch the beginning. So what the Navy guy says is, stand on the brakes with me. And they say, all right. So they're standing on the brakes. The Navy guy runs the throttle to full power and keeps it there for 5 seconds. So those engines are making all of the power they can possibly make. And then he says, okay, 3, 2, 1, let go of the brakes. They let go of the brakes, and the guy pulls full aft on the stick, which is not how you normally take off. Full aft. You need to keep that nose down to pick up airspeed, but he's just got it in his guts like this. And this thing is going, and it gets to the edge, and it just wobbles off into the sky. Just wobbles off. Get the gear up, cut the drag, pushes the nose down gently. This unnamed, well, I had his name. This Navy guy taught these Air Force bomber pilots how to take off from carriers. And Jimmy Doolittle, you got the Hornet. Let's say it's this long, the flight deck, and you've got the back half is filled up with bombers, and you don't have time to bring them up on the elevators. They've all got to be on deck. So they are on deck. In fact, they couldn't get them on the elevators. They loaded them by cranes onto the Hornet in San Francisco. So they sail halfway across the Pacific, most of the way across the Pacific, in fact, all the way across the Pacific. And during the journey, the back half of the aircraft carrier is wall-to-wall bombers. So that means that the first airplane doesn't have an aircraft carrier deck to take off on. He's got half a deck to take off on. Half. And the first guy off is Jimmy Doolittle. And he practiced the procedure along with everybody else. And just as they launched that first plane, the Hornet hit like a trough or something, and Doolittle's plane goes off and disappears. And it was invisible for like 6-7 seconds, which is eternity. And then all of a sudden, you just see him just pulling away. And it got every plane that took off after Doolittle got a little bit easier because because they had a little bit more runway, a little bit more room. And another one of the heroes of that mission, and again, I had his name. I don't think it made it into the final version. But the guy who was, I guess he would have been paddles if they had been landing. The guy who was the guy who would do the launch. And think about this. This guy had trained with the Army guys, and he knew there were 16 Raiders, I think. I should know that. But I think there were 16, 18, something like that. And he knew every one of the pilots and every one of the crews. So that they're launching in heavy seas, which they were not expecting. And so the guy who is dropping the flag for when to go has two things to consider. Number one, where is the bow of the ship? What is the bow doing? And much more importantly, what will the bow be doing by the time that this bomber gets to the end of the deck? So he's got to factor that in. And then he also has to factor in how quick each individual pilot is once he drops the flag, because there's some minor a little bit slow getting off the brake, so I got to give him a little bit more time. And then this guy is timing it so that he's launching them as the bow of the Hornet is going down into the waves. That's when he wants to drop the flag for two reasons. First of all, the plane is going downhill at a pretty steep angle. I mean, it's 15, 20 degrees. It's heavy seas. Halsey said he'd never seen seas that heavy before. So he flags the guy just as the thing is coming down, so the Hornet is going downhill, which helps its acceleration. And if he times it just right, he gets it so that the bow is actually coming up, and the bow actually would launch them, would just like a catapult, get them up into the sky. And those guys were amazing. And what they went through after they landed was amazing. Most of them were fine. If I recall correctly, there were 16 Raiders, and 5 of them or 6 of them had really rough times. The other ones just managed to, ditch in either the ocean or over China, hook up with Chinese nationalists, got smuggled out. I think Doolittle got home within 3 weeks, something like that. But the guys who had to crash land, their lives were absolute hell. A couple of them were executed by the Japanese. The story ends with one of them surviving in a Japanese prison camp, gets liberated by the Americans after the Japanese surrender, and this guy comes into this room and he sees this skeleton of a man, just skin and bones with a long beard lying in the straw. And he says, oh, this is obviously some crazy guy. And just as he's closing the door, the guy says, I'm an American. He hasn't talked in like 2 years. You're what? I'm an American. How long have you been here? Since 1942. I was I flew with Doolittle. No, those guys all died, 3 years ago. No, there's 3 of us here. And then the business with the goblets, all of that. Yes, Darth Chuck the Merciless says Japanese ended up killing like 200,000 people over it. Yeah, I think it was a quarter of a million Chinese were executed by the Japanese for helping the Americans escape. And I think about those Chinese, and I think, well, where did those Chinese go? And the answer is they went to Taiwan. So there we go. But yes, Capital G Geek, I'd like to do something, and I think it gets more likely if it turns out that things go so south for Daily Wire that they have a fire sale. I will think about making them an offer, even though I don't really have the capital to do it right now. All right, here's our friend Road Rider. Hey, Bill, great backstage this week. Thanks, it was fun. Glad Scott is A-OK. At least his colon is A-OK. It is. I was very happy to see that and hear that too. Spend time on my commute home telling me all about Carnegie, Morgan, Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, and the rest. With the memory of the powerful Starship Discovery fresh in mind, I immediately thought that while those barons of industry were indeed big, powerful, and were all the good and bad of capitalists, is it me or does Elon Musk tower above those guys? Carnegie had steel, Rockefeller oil, Morgan had banking, Musk has SpaceX, X, Tesla, Neuralink, the Boring Company, XAI, Gigafactory, Grok, Starlink. And the pay and benefits of its employees of all these companies is not the low wages of the robber baron days. So the question is it even close? Elon versus those other dudes, or are we witnessing something that will be shared in history, brain plants for 100 years or more? Um, um, wow. Hang on. Let me say, well, I'll answer the easy part first. There are some things where I think he has some blind spots still, and I sure would love to talk to him about them. But I don't think there's any question that Elon Musk is the most important human being to walk the earth in a century, and I think you could probably make the case, maybe ever, maybe of all time. If all of these roots that he's planted come to fruition, then there will be no question he is the most valuable human that ever lived, and I kind of think he's already achieved that. And I don't think there's any question about it. Just for the fact that, look, if he alone had restarted humanity's space program, and that's all he had done, then that probably would have won him the title anyway. But when you add the rest of the stuff, that's why I mentioned the stuff earlier about wanting to go to this Iboga thing. I could be a lot closer to Elon Musk if I wasn't constantly tripping myself up with this voice. Not saying I'd be exactly the same, but the world I want to see for myself is going out there with the confidence to get some serious capital, and then having a studio that produced this stuff, and then constantly in motion. We've got, the Battle of Leyte Gulf as a feature film, all of it, including featuring Taffy 3, but with all of it, because you can't really tell Taffy 3 without the other 4 battles, or 3 battles. And unlike that Midway monstrosity that appeared and disappeared a couple years ago, nobody cared about the characters, badly written, and the effects were so over the top it was just a joke. I remember in that movie there's a dive bomber that pulls out of the dive, and as he pulls out of the dive, he dips a wing in the water to show how low he goes. Well, dipping a wing in the water, which is 600 times denser than air, does not allow you to basically make a little fin-shaped thing through the water. You cartwheel instantly, and why? It's not dramatic enough. You destroy the Japanese naval power in 6 minutes, and that's not dramatic enough. You have to add all of this stuff, make it look like a Call of Duty mission. Please. One of the keys that I really want to keep with AI and CGI is that if we were to do Taffy 3, or if we were to do, every shot would have to be a shot that could have come from a physical platform. In other words, no aerial shots where the planes go shoom, shoom, shoom like this. You can shoot them in formation, but it's got to look like it comes from a camera plane. And if you do that, you will add enormously to the realism, and you'll subtract from the spectacle, and people will be much more invested. Because, nope, we have seen it, these explosions of these guys are just flying through, they're flying through a fireworks display. But it's not sacrifices of what was it? Was it Torpedo 8 or Torpedo 6 from Enterprise, where the entire torpedo attack squadron was shot down and every single person was killed except for Ensign Gay, who had the best seat in the war. He watched the entire thing from a raft. He was constantly being strafed. He had to hide under the raft. But all of those guys died, and the Japanese thought they died for nothing, but what they did was they pulled the Japanese air cover down to deal with the torpedo bombers, which have to attack at 200 or 300 feet. Who am I kidding? More like 80 feet or something, or less, 20, 30 feet, whatever the number is. Down he goes. And then the dive bombers come in, and my God, what a victory. Now the Pinnacle's already reached Top Gun Maverick, the last 7 flyable Corsairs in formation filmed in real life. Did they actually have that, Darth? Is there? I don't remember that shot at all. Top Gun Maverick has 7 Corsairs in formation, because I remember Baba Black Sheep had usually 6 or 7, but that was 40 years ago, something like that. Anyway, now I have to go find that. So yeah, I'm 100% with you, Road Rider. I think he's by far the top candidate for this. Broke college student. Hello, Bill. Topic: wasted political capital. My caveat is that the midterms will verify or deny the following claim. Trump specifically has destroyed a lot of credibility with his base and independent voters through his actions and inactions. Examples: Iran war, only popular with older Fox News viewers, lasting longer than promised, and economic impact, turning off younger voters. Slowdowns on deportations, floating amnesty and not punishing Salazar for floating amnesty. Comments about not caring about housing or cost of living and focusing on DOW. Epstein, an appearance of insider oil trading in Iran war, and Make America Healthy Against slowdowns. If Trump wanted to pull a Jackson and ignore a likely Supreme Court ruling about birthright citizenship for illegals, he would need political capital, which he has used in Iran. How much do you think this keeps the our leaning dependents home? Do you think this is an accurate analysis? If not, what could convince you that it was true? No, I'm sorry to say, I think you got it exactly right. I was watching a different channel, and this channel quoted Nick Fuentes, and I don't watch Nick Fuentes, but Fuentes said that Donald Trump is allergic to bad publicity, and when the coverage gets bad, that's when he will stop. And it pains me to say that I kind of think that is seems to be true based on the evidence. Deportations, and then those 2 people who plainly, if not deserved to be shot, certainly were co-conspirators in their own outcome, and he just basically stopped it. And we have yet to see a high-level conviction. They're going after Comey for the 86-47 thing, which doesn't seem like a terribly strong case, but we haven't seen anything else. A lot of people were down on Bondi before she got fired, but they were right about it. And you need both houses of Congress for this stuff. Like I say, the deportations just essentially stopped once the anti-ICE rioting got bad enough. His handling of the Epstein files were just appalling. On the contrary, I might point out, Elon Musk handled those things perfectly. He said, yes, my name is going to appear many times in the Epstein files because I had a lot of money, and Epstein's job is to connect people. So he made many attempts to contact me, and I declined all of them. But you will find my name in the Epstein files many, many times, and there you go. That's how you handle it. Him extending the H-1Bs and his insults to the American people regarding the Epstein files, all of this is just really shockingly bad. And Roadrunner says that the SAVE Act not being passed is really going to bite the Republicans. Yes, thank God for the court and the gerrymandering thing, but the SAVE Act should have been number 1, because next presidency and so on should have been absolutely number 1, and I don't know what's happened to him. I am disappointed and becoming more disappointed. With that said, I look at the competition, and I look at him, and I look at the people who are criticizing him, and I'm behind him all the way. But I have not a whole lot of experience with Vance. I thought that Vance was very good with interviews, and I'd be perfectly happy to see J.D. Vance as the next president. But I think that so far he's been outshone by Marco Rubio, who has done a simply unbelievable job. And I'm not saying this as a knock against Vance. I'm just saying, having watched Rubio have a lot more opportunities to defend these policies, my opinion of Marco, which was pretty high, is off the charts high now. And that's that's the kind of president I would like. I would like Marco Rubio. I'd like somebody who was consistent, strong, polite, articulate, graceful, and all of those things. So I don't know. We'll see. And you got to also factor in Donald Trump is what, 80 now or something, or right around there, and he's been shot at 3 times, and you slow down when you get older, and I don't know how he's survived any of the Trump now of the opprobrium and the attacks he's endured ever since he entered. But I suspect that Trump is just getting a little tired, and but he's still here 100%. And when you see Biden speaking, it's almost impossible to believe that actually happened for 4 years. So, yeah, and Eric says Trump has given Vance leadership of the anti-fraud crackdowns. We'd better see some crackdowns. And you know what? I want to see some frickin' convictions. I want people to go to jail. I want the people that opened the Leering Academy to go to jail, and I want to see them go to jail. I'm tired of this, we're going to stop it in the future. You're not going to stop anything unless there's consequences. They need to be sent to Smurf Island. So, there you go. Roadrunner is back. Hey, greetings, friend Bill. Hello, Roadrunner. I strongly endorse Geek's suggestion above about trying to get the rights for your What We Saw series. Getting some of your best work out from behind the paywall will be a great benefit for a lot of people. I say some of because you have many other great videos like the true story of the atomic bombs, which should be mandatory viewing in every high school and university. Please keep up your hard work. We're expecting great things from you and the colonies. Thank you, Roadrunner. You I have a special debt of thanks to, and I really appreciate everything you've done for us and continue to do for us. And yes, we will get all those things done, and we are going to see the behold the power of this fully armed and operational battle station. It's great. Bob Neef, well, I appreciate your discussion on colonoscopy. I got to tell you my last experience. The night before, I was reading about it and found out that in Europe, only about 50% get anesthesia, and I thought to myself, heck, I'm tougher than those Europeans, so I skipped the drugs. It was slightly uncomfortable at a few junctures, but no big deal, and no recovery time. Give it a try. I had, on my first time, as I mentioned on the show, I had light anesthesia, and then I felt like I got punched in the guts from the inside of the guts. And since the guy was standing there, I said, yeah, man, let's just take a deep dive. With that said, if that had not been available, I absolutely could have endured it. It was just a question of comfort. It was not, it was by no means unbearable pain. I have a pretty good pain tolerance, and I have a pretty low tolerance about, whining about pain. So that kind of hits me right where I live. There's an episode of the Mike Rowe Show where they're talking about, I'm not going to give you any of the details or give away or anything, but the subject of the story is a guy who was a soldier and, among other things, got stabbed in the guts with a bayonet. And somewhere towards that end of that show, I said, I don't know how to say this, Mike. I really don't. I know it's gonna sound horrible, but I'm just gonna say it because this is what I think. I think there's quite a few people out there who could really use a stab in the guts. People really need to understand how far we are from the baseline of human existence. I remember during COVID, I was really sick. I had a temperature of 102 plus for 8 days and 104 plus for 2 or 3, and I was really, really not happy. And at the time, I remember thinking, I feel so miserable, and and I felt like, and you should feel miserable. You need to feel miserable. All of your ancestors had to endure yellow fever or malaria or cholera, any of this stuff. It's important to you to know what it's like to be really, really sick, because it's not fun. And to think about what these men and women did, feeling that bad or worse, is a measure of how good I have it. And it made me very, very grateful to live in the time that I did. I don't believe in pointless suffering, but I think that physical pain, suffering, is something that everybody should have to endure. I'm not saying we inflict it on them. Like I said on the Mike Rowe show, I'm not recommending you should go out and get recreationally stabbed in the guts with a bayonet by any means, but I'm saying there is a benefit that comes from dealing with that kind of adversity. And twice in my life, I have been in overwhelming pain for 4 hours. Once was when impacted wisdom tooth hit the nerve on my jaw, and the entire left side of my body went numb, and I just had to lie down on a wet field in Florida for 6 hours, and it hurt so bad, and I had the exact same experience with the kidney stone. And I remember both times, about 4 hours before I got some relief, at least on both of those. I remember thinking, I cannot remember what it was like to not be in pain, and I cannot imagine what it would be like to not be in this kind of pain in the future. It is just your entire universe of hurt. But because I got through both of those and went through them, and I'm on the other side of them, and and I'm still here, I don't fear pain anymore. In fact, I've kind of learned. I've been, like I said, I don't do this recreationally, but the moments where I have been like in relatively severe pain for a really short period of time, I actually tell myself, okay, it hurts, but what exactly is the sensation? And I try to isolate the sensation. It's pain. Yeah. But what is it though? What is it? And that actually really seems to help a lot. Is trying to get to the basis of what that thing actually is, what that stimulus actually is. Worked for me, but you are clearly a steely-eyed missile man, and no one would doubt that for a second. And I think I'm just damn proud of it. Okay, we got two to go. We got Jamould. I can't believe I'm doing all of these tonight, but there you go. John Pershing says compartmentalizing pain is a proven technique. Yes, it does work. What is the experience? Instead of it just overwhelming your entire brain, just have your conscious mind, your cerebral cortex say, what is the sensation? What does it actually feel? It hurts. Yeah. But what does that mean? And it really helps. And if you've ever seen Brian Regan, who's one of the funniest guys alive, if you ever go to the hospital and they ask you for your pain level, always say 8. Jamould says, hey, Bill, in previous TSLs you mentioned you're a fan of British sitcoms. Have you watched Father Ted? And if so, what are your thoughts on it? I haven't, but for some strange reason, in the last 10 days or so, I've been seeing a lot of feeds for Father Ted. I haven't seen it, but I can give you a couple of bona fides. I've seen every single episode of Mitchell and Webb. I've seen every single thing that Harry Enfield has ever done, especially the stuff he does with Paul Whitehouse. I've seen every episode of The Fast Show. That is a brilliant show. Suit You, Sir, and Alf, and Suit You, Sir, just alone is strange and great. Harry and Paul. So Harry Enfield's done at least 3 different series. And the last one that he did, Harry and Paul, is I think my favorite show of all time. I just think those two are so freaking brilliant. I just can't stand it. Roadrunner says Fawlty Towers. Harry and Paul is my favorite comedy duo, but I will stand up in public and say against all comers that there has never been a funnier show than Fawlty Towers. Fawlty Towers is the funniest thing that has ever been placed on this earth. It's the funniest thing that humans have ever done, in my opinion. Even the second set that they did, which was no match for the first one. John Cleese has was apparently not a very pleasant guy at all. He's become very bloated and very pompous. But John Cleese in Fawlty Towers is, I think that's the greatest comedy performance ever. The speed and the accuracy that he can move from obsequiousness to rage or back and forth again, and his mannerisms, his physical comedy, and he wrote it. He wrote it. Honestly, I have never laughed harder in my life, and I've laughed really hard. When Sam Kinison first did "You live in a desert," I thought I was going to die. And when I first saw Monty Python in the theater, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, by the time they got to the credits and a moose bit my sister once, I thought I was going to die. But honestly, when John Cleese comes out of that restaurant on whatever dinner night or whatever it was, gourmet night, and his car won't start, and he starts swearing and shaking his fist at the car, and he says, "Right, that's it. I'm going to give you a damn good thrashing." And he disappears. He runs out of frame for like 5-6 seconds, and he comes back and starts whacking his car with a branch. I really thought I would have had an aneurysm on that. I just couldn't believe how good that was. The Fast Show, I think it was the Fast Show, had a ongoing series with Paul Whitehouse and the guy who played Bunny on the Harry and Paul Quare sketches, which I think is maybe certainly the top 3 or 4 sketches of all time. The surgeons and the guys arguing about who's a queer. But the guy who played Bunny on that was Ted, and Ted was the common working man, and the other guy played this this very lonely like estate owner, and that was not only funny, it was the most touching, heartbreaking, moving, warm. It was fantastic series of sketches. I watched a little bit of Are You Being Served, or Have You Been Served, about the department store. My dad loved that show, and I found myself humming a tune, and I could not place it, but it was a theme from a sitcom, and it was bow up ba-da-da-da-dum bum bum ba ba bum 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 ba-dum bum bum ba-da-dum bum bow up ba-da-da-da-dum bum bum ba-da-dum bum. And I thought, where is that from? And it's only much later that I found it, and it was from a show that I'd watched a lot when I was much younger called Doctor in the House. But Mitchell and Webb, Harry and Paul are terrific, and I have to say, to be fair, Key and Peele have moments when they're absolutely transcendentally brilliant. Really clever stuff. Yeah, the colonoscopy parade was pretty humorous. It's exactly how I remember it. It was rather queer. Well, I wasn't queer. It was just the guy who was the orderly was the queer. Although he was an excellent shot, which does militate him being a queer. Yeah, Doctor in the House. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. I was on amazing tranquilizers, and I said, just chop off whatever you want to. I don't care. So I love them, and I'm trying to think if there's any others. I watched a lot of some of these are comedies. Obviously, I watched EastEnders for a while, and I watched all of Upstairs Downstairs. Watched almost all of Downton Abbey before they kept bringing it back 9 or 10 times. The first 2 seasons of Downton Abbey were really, really good. Upstairs Downstairs is, I think, what Downton Abbey was kind of based on, and that was a tremendous series. So Yeah, and then there's others like there was a period in the '90s when I was doing the sketch comedy show in Gainesville, and I had a gay apartment mate, not a gay roommate, who was part of the group, and he introduced me to Absolutely Fabulous, which in its initial incarnation is blindingly good, just great. Just great. That really, really funny. Great. Patsy was great. Eddie was great. The grandmother was great. Safi was great. There's a scene where Jennifer Saunders, who's always been pretty heavy, she plays a super flamboyant and very, very dim-witted fashion mogul, and it's just mocking like the elites, and her mother, the grandmother, is just old school British, very, very dry, very quiet, very discreet. And there's a scene where Adina is screaming at her mother, and she says, "Now you listen to me, you old woman. Inside of me is a thin person trying to get out." And the grandmother looks at her and she goes, "Just the one, dear? Just the one?" Yeah, there looks like there's 5 fat people inside you trying to get out. So, yeah, they're great. They're absolutely brilliant. And they're fantastic. 2 guys playing chopsticks on the piano without their hands. I don't think I remember seeing that. But and then they brought it back and they lost the theme song, which was, I thought, the best part of Wheels on Fire. I guess what's her name had a problem with it because the later episodes, maybe it's U.S. clearance they couldn't get, but Wheels on Fire with the was just great. That was a real '90s thing. Also, I have to say, since we're talking about comedy shows, one of the sources of enjoyment throughout my entire life, for many years, at least a decade, was Mystery Science Theater 3000. I'm a Team Mike guy. There are a lot of Team Joel guys, and I get the Joel thing. I just like Mike, but I think that show, there was a period there in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, when they ran it on Comedy Central, I think, every night, and we would just stay up at midnight or whatever and watch MST3K every single night, and that show had some absolutely genius moments. And even when it wasn't genius, it was just fun to watch. So yeah, there's some classics. All right, we got one last one to go here. Tonight, the case of the Doomer Dans. Okay, Bill, so this week, as you may know, we've seen the latest debates for the California gubernatorial race and the LA mayoral race. Now, leaving aside, for example, how beautifully the Republican mayoral candidate tore down Bass and the other socialist on stage, what struck me most about the 2 debates was how any and all commentary from the pundits on our side was apparently required to say on a repeated basis something like, "Now, we're probably not going to win this race," or "Republicans pretty much have no chance." I haven't watched any of it, but that sounds about right. And I'll be blunt, Bill, every friggin' time I wanted to scream through cyberspace at these pundits, "You're not helping." No, of course not. If you tell people they're going to lose, they're going to lose. The way that the big victories against overwhelming odds in history has gone because the leadership, usually the leadership, has managed to convince these outnumbered bastards that they're going to win this thing. And you will not find a better example of this than the movie Zulu, by the way, which is an absolute must-watch. It's an astonishing movie, 1964, very fair to the Zulu, very fair, and just a tremendous, tremendous, tremendous drama. True story. If I had a big studio and had a giant history department, I would redo Rorke's Drift. Char and Bromhead looked nothing like that. They both had these big shovel beards and stuff. But if I were to do it, I think I'd be a lot more on the tactics of it. You watch the movie and everything that was in the movie really happened, but the genius of the defense of Rorke's Drift was Chard and Bromhead, how every time they got hit, they would just withdraw, tighten up the line. Every time they would contract the line, they'd have more guns, per yard, and then this final battle where they come out of the melee boxes and they, and they just start putting down these barrages that just looked and sounded like battleship volleys coming off. So it was great. I will say, I forget his name. It says a lot. But the Republican, he's not even a Republican. I think he's a Democrat. The guy who had been living in a trailer on his burned down house, he's been doing AI videos, and they are effective. He's got one where Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass and Kamala Harris are like French aristocracy, and people kind of rise up and they're running from the palace, covered with being pelted with rotten tomatoes. It was great. Spencer Pratt, yeah, I think he's a Democrat, but Spencer Pratt is the kind of guy who seems he's a Republican. I thought that Pratt was a he's certainly a conservative. I thought he was a conservative running as a Democrat so that he'd have some chance in California. I don't know how he's doing, but his ads are kicking ass. And he is really making fun of, he's doing the one thing that he needs to do, and that is ridicule these people, ridicule them. So, there you go. My God, we got through all of that. This was a lot of show tonight. A lot of things to talk about, a lot of things we did talk about, and we are at 3 hours. It was a pretty intense show. Anyway, I want to thank everybody again for being here. For the support over the years, and especially the special support, and you know who you are, and especially for being so. Didn't finish your question. Sorry. Seriously, Bill, have none of these guys ever heard of self-fulfilling prophecies? If you're a California Republican voter constantly treated to this, you've got no chance. Why even bother? Yes, people won't even come out. So here's a bright idea. How about we teach our pundits, be it Daily Wire, The Blaze, etc., to just shut up on these races being impossible to win. Yes, you not only have to not say we're going to lose, you have to say we're going to win. We're going to win. Hey, thank you. I don't know how to pronounce it. Is it Curliton? Because there's a one there. But anyway, thank you very much for everybody and all the kind words tonight. And I'm looking forward to letting you know next week how things are going. Natasha's doing well. Her wrist is fully healed. She's still getting some mobility back, but she's doing fine. But the Dubai trip really did stress her out. With those explosions, and she I love her so much, but she has a tendency to, as I do too when I get into these moods, to catastrophize things, and I often feel like my attempt to kind of be rational about it doesn't have any effect or any visible effect. But just last night, I think it was 2 nights ago, just we were going to bed, she said, Bill, I can't tell you how much, Billy, I can't tell you how much it meant to me, when I was in Dubai, hearing you just kind of, explaining it. Darth Chuck says, explosions, what did I miss? Yeah, I guess you must have missed it. Natasha went to see her daughter. There are a few countries that Russians and Americans can visit without going to embassies and getting visas. You fill out the visas on the plane. And so I sent Natasha, instead of meeting in Mexico, as they had the previous 3 times, Natasha met her daughter, my stepdaughter, Diana, in Dubai, which was paradise. They were having the greatest possible time. They've been there 4 days. And then the Iran war started, and there's explosions everywhere and air raid sirens. And she saw a Shahed drone just fly right overhead. And they had been given warnings that they need to seek shelter. There were no bomb shelters or anything. So the first night of the attacks, she and her daughter, it was going to be both she and her daughter in this laundry room. It was they had a nice apartment, more like a condo. It's like a timeshare kind of thing. And when they got there, they sent me a video about it, showing me how much they loved it and stuff. And then when the explosion started, The only room that didn't have glass in it or around it was the laundry room, which was very tiny. So they took a bunch of like comforters off the bed, and Deanna slept in the laundry room, kind of, up against the machine. And then I watched that video like 7 or 8 times all the way through, because it was they just did a pan of the whole thing. And I said, all right, honey, this may seem counterintuitive, but take all of the mattresses and stuff off of the bed. The living room consisted of a wall with 2 tall vertical windows like this. And I said, put your mattresses up against the wall, but not touching the wall. That's really important, that you're not touching the wall, especially not your head. But that's where I want you to sleep, because there's not room anywhere. The kitchen had a window that was up high that if it had blown in, it would have showered glass on both of them. The bathroom had these huge glass dividers in it. And I knew that, I said, if there's an explosion nearby, the windows are going to come in, but you will be in the shadow of those. And there was plenty of wide room there. So it went from being a great time with her daughter for the first 4 days, and I was so happy when I called her and said, honey, we closed the deal on doing some AI videos for pay. And I said, if you guys can stay another week if you want to. And they just both started crying. They were so happy. And then later that night at about, I don't know what time it was, get a call from Natasha saying, there's explosions and these warnings. And, so the last 4 or 5 days they were there. I can say this honestly. I wouldn't have been the slightest bit worried. I'm a military guy. I know that these Shahed drones are targeted. They're not like Scud missiles that could land anywhere. And a Scud missile has a huge warhead that could take out an entire building, maybe even a block. These things have the Shaheds have to fly 1,000 miles in some cases. So I just tried to explain to her, honey, these things carry a small warhead, and they are aimed at specific buildings. They hit like the #1 Western Hotel, which would be a target. But I'm saying they are not coming for the happy stay, timeshare condo, and the explosions are really pretty small, and so your chances of being hurt are essentially zero. I couldn't honestly tell her that when she went to the airport, because they hit the airport many times, but I told her that, look, I don't think they're going to send more than 2 or 3 drones to UAE, to Dubai. I knew that there was going to be some kind of action. I didn't think the U.S. would launch the attack until they got back, but I also knew that even if they did, the U.S. wasn't going to attack Dubai, and I couldn't see any way possible that Iran would attack an Arab nation, especially during Ramadan. I just simply, it was simply off the table. I couldn't imagine it. I found out later that apparently they launched more drones against Dubai than they did against Tel Aviv, which absolutely blows my mind. But yeah, just when they were calming down and it looked like, things might be all right, they're, middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, when the fires happened last year, she was convinced that they were going to eventually get to our house, and I could not talk her out of it. There was no chance they were going to get to our house. We live in the middle of the flat valley, and anybody in canyons where all of that, fuel is and all the dried grass, those people are in genuine life-threatening danger, but we were fine. But it wasn't enough, so I had to get her a hotel down in Orange County for a couple nights because she couldn't get it out of her head. So that's what men are for, boys. Our job is to keep our women safe and more importantly, make them believe they're safe. So that's the #1 job. Anyway, you guys have been awesome tonight. It's been a real pleasure, and thank you for putting up with all this stuff I talked about earlier without without judgment and with a lot of support. It means the world to me. And I've got a phone call tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock that I will be very, very anxious to get the results of. Then we have to figure out how to get there. But first things first. Okay, anyway, thanks for joining us. It's been a pleasure. And we will see you guys next Thursday for Stratosphere Lounge. And until then, you guys just kind of, keep it together. Don't let the Smurfs get you down. And we'll see you in a week or so.